pause before replying. Silence is one of the most underrated weapons in human communication. When you pause before replying, even for a few seconds, you shift the power dynamic instantly. Most people rush to fill silence, afraid of seeming uncertain or awkward. But those who master the pause create an aura of calm control and confidence that others can feel. It makes people lean in, wondering what you'll say next. That quiet space unsettles manipulators. It breaks their rhythm, ruins their scripts, and forces them to reveal more than they intended. In conversations, the pause becomes a mirror of strength. It tells the other person, I don't react, I decide. When someone tries to pressure you, provoke you, or emotionally bait you, your silence is their mirror. It reflects their intent right back at them. The manipulator expects you to rush, to defend, to justify. But the moment you choose not to play that game, the illusion of their control cracks. Psychologically, pausing before replying gives your brain time to transition from emotional impulse to logical processing. You stop reacting from fear or anger and begin responding from clarity. That few seconds can mean the difference between being played and staying composed. It shows emotional maturity, confidence, and self-mastery, the kind of stillness that makes others question themselves. People trust those who don't rush to speak. A measured response signals thoughtfulness and certainty, while haste smells of insecurity. The pause is presence. It's the subtle proof that you're not being led, you're leading, even in silence. Ask, what do you mean exactly? These 5 words can slice through manipulation like a knife through fog. When someone is vague, evasive, or emotionally charged, asking, what do you mean exactly, forces clarity into the conversation. Manipulators thrive on ambiguity. They hide behind unclear statements, emotional generalizations, and loaded phrases that make you doubt yourself. But this question pulls their words into the light, stripping away the power of confusion. Suddenly, they must define their intent, and in doing so, their game often unravels. This simple question does more than seek understanding. It exposes motive. It stops emotional momentum and redirects control back to you. A liar hates precision because it anchors them to their own story. A gaslighter hates it because it prevents them from reshaping reality. And someone trying to guilt trip you hates it because it reveals the emptiness of their accusation. By calmly asking, what do you mean exactly? You become the observer, not the target. Psychologically, it activates your critical thinking and disengages emotional reactivity. Instead of defending yourself against a fog of insinuation, you demand substance. It's a verbal mirror that reflects accountability. If the person's intentions are pure, they'll clarify. If not, they'll stumble, deflect, or retreat. This question commands respect without aggression. It signals that you are not easily swayed by tone or emotion. You want facts, not feelings. In a world full of manipulative persuasion and half-truths, those who dare to demand precision stand unshakable. It's not confrontation, it's power disguised as curiosity. Repeat requests to confirm. Repetition is not just about clarity, it's about control. When you calmly repeat what someone has just asked of you, you force their intentions into the open. Manipulators rely on speed, confusion, and emotional pressure. They want you to agree before you fully understand. But when you repeat their words exactly as they said them, you shine a bright light on the hidden hooks buried inside the requests. Suddenly, what was vague becomes concrete, and what was manipulative becomes obvious. Imagine someone saying, "It would really mean a lot if you could handle this for me." You respond, "So you're asking me to take responsibility for this entire project on my own?" That echo holds power. It makes the invisible visible. Many manipulators retreat the moment you restate their request, because the illusion only works when it stays blurry. The instant you define it, their leverage begins to crumble. Psychologically, repeating a request creates a pause in the emotional flow of conversation. It gives you time to analyze. while signaling to the other person that you process information deliberately. It's an act of assertive listening, but it also places subtle pressure on them. They must own their words, clarify, or correct themselves. When you repeat requests, you protect yourself from being cornered by guilt, urgency, or persuasion. It's not passive, it's strategic neutrality. You're saying, I hear you, but I choose to understand before I agree. That quiet insistence on clarity disarms deceit, slows manipulation, and builds respect. In repetition, you reclaim your power. Name your feeling. I feel pressured. There is immense strength in naming what you feel. When you say, I feel pressured, you shatter the manipulator's invisible hold on you. Most forms of psychological control thrive on unspoken emotion, on your confusion, guilt, or fear staying buried where it can be used against you. But the moment you identify and speak your feeling, you drag it out of the shadows and into the open, where it loses its power. Saying, I feel pressured is not weakness, it's awareness. It disrupts the emotional current of manipulation by declaring, I know what's happening, and I'm not lost in it. It exposes intent without accusation. Manipulators prefer you to internalize pressure so they can twist it silently into compliance. But when you voice it, the tension bounces back to them. They must either justify their behavior or back off completely. Psychologically, naming emotions activates your rational brain. It calms your nervous system, interrupts panic, and keeps you anchored in reality. It's like flipping on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes visible and manageable. This phrase also protects your dignity. It communicates that you won't be pushed or guilted into choices. It demands respect without aggression. Most importantly, it shifts the emotional balance. You move from being acted upon to being self-aware and grounded. When you can say, I feel pressured, you remind both yourself and others that your emotions belong to you, not to anyone else's control. Repeat your boundary calmly. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it repeats itself, quietly, without fear. When you calmly restate your boundary, you teach others that your limits are not up for debate. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactions. They want you to argue, defend, or explain yourself, because every word you give them becomes material to twist. But when you simply repeat your boundary, steady voice, relaxed face, no justification, you take away their weapon. I understand, but my answer is still no. Those words can feel like armor. The manipulator expects frustration or guilt. Instead, they meet composure. The silence between your sentences becomes unbearable to them because your peace exposes their chaos. Every calm repetition is a mirror, reflecting their pressure back until they have nowhere left to push. Psychologically, this technique rewires your mind from fear to control. You stop defending your worth and start asserting your right to peace. The calm tone tells your nervous system that you're safe, even when challenged. It also sends a deep message to the other person. I will not be moved by noise. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks you control. Each time you repeat your no without emotional charge, you strengthen that lock. The world begins to recognize your limits, not through aggression, but through your unwavering stillness. In a society where people mistake kindness for weakness, calm repetition becomes your quiet rebellion and your greatest protection. Ask for time. Manipulators crave urgency. They push you to decide now, to agree fast, to react before you think. That's how they win, by keeping you trapped in emotional momentum. But when you calmly say, I need some time to think about it, everything changes. You disrupt their rhythm, remove their leverage, and reclaim control over your decisions. Time is the great equalizer. It turns emotional fog into clarity and impulsive choices into deliberate action. Asking for time is not hesitation, it's strategy. It's a quiet declaration that you will not be rushed or cornered. Most people confuse speed with strength, but the truth is the opposite. Those who can pause, reflect, and delay reaction are always the ones in control. Manipulators fear time because it dissolves their illusion. The spell of persuasion only works in the moment. Given space, it loses its power. Psychologically, time allows your rational mind to take back command from your emotional one. The initial shock, guilt, or flattery fades, revealing the truth beneath. You begin to see motives clearly, weigh options objectively, and spot the manipulation you might have missed in the heat of the moment. When you ask for time, you're not rejecting the person. You're protecting yourself. It's a gentle yet firm boundary that says, I make decisions on my own schedule, not yours. In that pause, you reclaim sovereignty over your thoughts. You remind the world and yourself that your mind is not a battlefield to be rushed, but a fortress that decides only when ready. Verify with others. Isolation is the manipulator's favorite weapon. They want you to trust their version of reality. No questions, no witnesses, no second opinions. The moment you verify with others, that illusion begins to collapse. When you say, let me check with someone else, you introduce sunlight into the shadows where manipulation breeds. It's a small phrase, but it tells the other person that you refuse to live inside their narrative. Manipulators fear verification because truth does not serve them. They rely on your silence and your impulse to believe to avoid appearing suspicious. But when you cross-check information, ask for a second view, or simply consult a trusted person, you step outside their psychological cage. The act of seeking perspective reactivates logic, replacing emotional fog with clarity. It also sends a powerful message. I am not alone, and I don't make decisions in secret. Psychologically, reaching out to verify disrupts the isolation spiral. It reminds your brain that your perceptions aren't the only lens. It balances emotional influence with factual grounding. Sometimes, even the act of explaining the situation to someone else makes manipulation obvious. You hear yourself say the words and realize how absurd or coercive they sound. Those who want to control you will call this disloyal or unnecessary. They'll accuse you of not trusting them. That's the tell. Healthy people welcome verification. Deceivers dread it. Asking for a second opinion isn't suspicion. It's sovereignty. It's the quiet declaration that truth matters more than pressure, and that's a power few manipulators can withstand. Ask, what's in it for me? This question slices straight through manipulation and exposes motive like nothing else. When you ask, what's in it for me, you refuse to be a pawn in someone else's plan. Manipulators thrive on appealing to guilt, loyalty, or emotion. They count on you wanting to please, to prove yourself, or to avoid conflict. But this question flips the dynamic completely. It shifts the spotlight from their agenda to your worth. Suddenly, the manipulator has to justify why your energy, time, and attention should serve them. It's not a selfish question. It's a boundary in disguise. It signals that you value yourself enough to demand balance and fairness. People who try to exploit others hate this question because it forces transparency. It makes them confront the fact that they're asking you to give something without offering anything real in return. And in that moment of exposure, their charm starts to falter. Psychologically, what's in it for me activates self-preservation and logical reasoning, cutting through emotional persuasion. It keeps you anchored in self-respect when others attempt to cloud your judgment with flattery or guilt. It reminds your subconscious that your time and energy are currency, not gifts to be taken for granted. When you dare to ask it, weak offers crumble and real opportunities remain. Those with good intentions will respect the question. Those with hidden motives will resent it. Either way, you win clarity, because at its core, this question isn't about greed. It's about refusing to sell yourself short ever again. Demand details and numbers. Vagueness is the manipulator's playground. They thrive in the fog of around, soon, and everyone knows. But the moment you demand details and numbers, the mist clears, and so does their control. Asking how much exactly or when specifically forces precision, and precision destroys deception. It's a subtle yet devastating move because it anchors the conversation in facts, not feelings. Manipulators rely on emotional momentum, not logic. They use ambiguity to keep you off balance, to make you feel uncertain while they stay in control. When you ask for concrete details, you interrupt that rhythm. Suddenly, they can't hide behind charm, urgency, or sympathy. They must prove what they're saying, and most of the time, they can't. Psychologically, numbers force the brain to shift from emotional processing to analytical reasoning. It cools your instincts and ignites your intellect. Instead of reacting to tone or fear, you evaluate evidence. The manipulator feels the shift instantly. Their emotional leverage starts to crumble. Facts don't bend to persuasion, and when you demand them, neither do you. Asking for specifics also signals authority. It shows you're not easily impressed or confused by vague promises. You said it'll be done soon. What date are we talking about? You mentioned a lot of people. Who exactly? These questions pierce through manipulation like sunlight through fog. The more detail you require, the more truth you reveal, and in that clarity, control silently returns to you. Request proof. Manipulators rely on emotion. Truth relies on evidence. When you say, "Can you show me proof?" you force the conversation to leave the emotional realm and enter the rational one. This single question dismantles entire strategies built on persuasion, authority, and fear. Those who seek to control you thrive on your willingness to believe without questioning, but demanding proof, calmly, firmly, signals that you will not move without substance. The moment you ask for proof, watch how people react. Honest individuals will respect the question and offer clarity. Manipulators will deflect, change the topic, or guilt you for doubting them. Their discomfort is your signal. They depend on the fog of assumption, on urgency and emotion blinding you to the absence of facts. By requesting evidence, you pierce through that fog like a spotlight, and suddenly, their words must stand on the ground of reality. Psychologically, this question activates critical thinking and disarms manipulation. It shifts power from influence to logic, from charm to accountability. It tells your subconscious, "I do not trade in feelings, I deal in facts." It makes you immune to scare tactics, emotional blackmail, and false authority. Asking for proof is not confrontation, it's protection. It's the calm voice that refuses to be swept away by stories, promises, or threats. It's the mental armor of someone who values truth over tension and clarity over comfort. Because when you demand evidence, deceit has nowhere left to hide. Use if X, then Y. Conditional language is the armor of emotional intelligence. When you say if X, then Y, you replace emotional chaos with logic, and that makes manipulation nearly impossible. Manipulators thrive on blurring boundaries, on making you feel obligated, guilty, or trapped into doing what they want. But a conditional statement draws a clean, sharp line between your choices and their outcomes. It's not confrontation, it's structure. For example, if you raise your voice, I'll leave this conversation. That sentence changes everything. It shifts power from reaction to intention. Instead of pleading, explaining, or defending, you calmly define cause and effect. Manipulators lose control when they realize you operate on principles, not persuasion. You're not rejecting them, you're defining your terms. Psychologically, this phrase reprograms your mind for autonomy. It reframes you from victim to architect, from passive recipient to active decider. The if acknowledges reality. The then declares your boundary. Together, they train your brain to link consequences to behavior instead of emotion to guilt. You stop absorbing pressure and start channeling clarity. Manipulators despise if X then Y because it denies them ambiguity. They can't twist your words or shift blame when the rules are explicit. The moment you use it, you reclaim power without shouting, threatening, or pleading. It's calm, rational, and impossible to gaslight. Every if defines your freedom. Every then reinforces your strength. In a world full of emotional traps and moving goalposts, conditional language is the quiet voice that says, "My choices have structure, my boundaries are real, and they're not up for negotiation." Get things in writing. Words can vanish, ink does not. When you insist on getting things in writing, you protect yourself from one of the oldest manipulation tactics there is, verbal promises. Manipulators love keeping things vague, spoken, and unrecorded. It gives them freedom to twist, deny, or misremember their commitments later. But when you calmly say, "Let's put that in writing," you build an invisible wall between you and deceit. Suddenly, the power shifts, their flexibility disappears, and accountability takes its place. Written agreements freeze reality. They capture intentions before they can be rewritten by emotion or time. The moment something is documented, the manipulator's greatest weapon, ambiguity, dies. Their tone may change. They may stall or say, "Don't you trust me?" That's the tell, because those who are honest never fear clarity. Only those planning to shift the story later will resist documentation. Psychologically, written records anchor facts to logic. They silence the chaos of memory and emotion that manipulators thrive on. When you can refer back to exact words, you remove their ability to gaslight or guilt you into false recall. Even a simple follow-up email, just confirming what we agreed, becomes a shield of truth. Getting things in writing is not paranoia. It's power wrapped in professionalism. It tells the world you deal in facts, not feelings. It's how the strong stay untangled in webs of persuasion and deceit. Because once it's written, the story can't be stolen. It's yours, sealed in ink and truth. Say no simply. There is profound strength in the simplest word in the human language, no. When spoken calmly and without decoration, it carries the weight of self-respect. Manipulators despise simple no's because they cannot twist them, debate them, or infect them with guilt. They survive on explanations, on the cracks created by your need to justify yourself. But when you say no, just no, you shut the door completely, leaving no emotional handle for them to grab. A clean refusal radiates confidence. It tells the world that you own your time, your energy, and your choices. The moment you begin to over-explain, you hand power back to the persuader. They will poke holes in your reasoning, appeal to your emotions, and make you question your decision. But a simple no ends the negotiation before it begins. Psychologically, this is boundary setting in its purest form. It teaches your mind that you don't owe anyone a performance to defend your limits. It breaks the people-pleasing reflex that manipulators exploit. And with practice, that single word becomes a shield, firm, silent, and unbreakable. A simple no does not require anger or apology. It is clarity embodied. It communicates strength without hostility and confidence without cruelty. The most powerful people aren't those who can say yes to everything. They are the ones who can say no without a tremor in their voice, without an ounce of guilt, and without the need to explain why. Let silence work. Silence is not emptiness, it's pressure. When you stop speaking, the world leans in. Manipulators fear silence because it forces them to fill it, to reveal what they'd rather keep hidden. Most people rush to respond, desperate to ease the tension that silence creates. But when you master stillness, you transform that tension into power. In negotiation, in argument, in persuasion, silence becomes the invisible force that makes others expose their intentions. When you let silence linger after someone's words, you deny them the emotional reaction they're fishing for. They expect defense, apology, or panic. Instead, they're met with calm quiet, and it unnerves them. They begin to explain themselves further, over-justify, or backtrack. Each extra word they spill reveals more truth than they meant to share. Silence is a psychological mirror. It reflects their energy back at them without giving them anything to hold on to. Neurologically, humans crave completion. Our brains rush to fill voids, to end discomfort. That's why silence is so powerful. It turns the manipulator's need for control against them. The longer you hold it, the more their mask slips. Silence also protects your emotions. It gives you a moment to breathe, to process, to regain control before you respond. It teaches patience, restraint, and authority, the marks of someone who cannot be provoked. When you stop reacting to fill silence, you become unreadable, unshakable, and untouchable, because true power often says nothing at all. Reflect facts, not emotions. When tension rises and words become weapons, the most powerful defense is calm reflection of reality. Reflecting facts, not emotions, means you refuse to be dragged into someone else's storm. Manipulators want you reactive. They feed off your frustration, guilt, or confusion. But when you respond with facts instead of feelings, their emotional hooks slide right off you. You stop being their puppet and become the mirror they can't control. Imagine someone says, "You never support me." Instead of defending or apologizing, you answer, "I helped you with your project yesterday and stayed up late to finish it." That's not cold, it's clarity. Facts cut through emotional fog and reveal what's true. Manipulators use exaggeration, guilt, and distortion to bend reality. Your job is to ground it again, calmly and precisely. Psychologically, this technique protects your nervous system from emotional contagion. It shifts your brain from fight or flight to analytical thinking. You move from reacting to observing, from defending to verifying. The conversation becomes about evidence, not emotion, and that's a battlefield manipulators hate. By anchoring to facts, you reclaim the narrative. You show that you won't argue over feelings you didn't create or realities that don't exist. It's not about being heartless, it's about staying centered. The moment you stop reacting to emotional bait, you become unreadable, untouchable, and in that calm neutrality, their power dissolves. Facts are your anchor, emotions are their weapon. Choose your ground wisely. Check sources first. Information is the most common weapon of manipulation, and blind belief is its sharpest edge. When you learn to check sources first, you strip manipulators of one of their greatest tools, false credibility. They thrive on emotional reactions, half-truths, and authority illusions. They want you to respond, not reflect. But the moment you pause and say, "Where did that come from?" or "Can you show me proof?" the illusion cracks. You move from being emotionally pulled to being intellectually in control. In a world where anyone can sound convincing, verification becomes your armor. Lies spread fast because they're designed to trigger feelings, fear, outrage, belonging. Those emotions bypass logic, making you easier to steer. Checking sources interrupts that manipulation by engaging your rational mind. It forces you to slow down, to separate fact from feeling, and to demand reality instead of narrative. Manipulators hate scrutiny. They rely on your trust or fatigue to sneak ideas into your belief system. But when you question the origin, when you investigate rather than absorb, you force them into the uncomfortable realm of truth. They stumble when asked for evidence because their foundation is smoke. Psychologically, checking sources builds self-respect. It shows you trust your judgment more than someone else's confidence. It makes you immune to rumors, gaslighting, and emotional propaganda. Every time you verify before believing, you reinforce your mental sovereignty. Because, in a world full of noise, truth belongs to the one who bothers to look twice. Ask open questions. Open questions are the flashlight you shine into the dark corners of manipulation. While closed questions invite yes or no answers, open ones demand explanation, and with explanation comes exposure. When you ask, "Can you tell me more about that?" or "How did you come to that conclusion?" you shift the balance of power. The manipulator, who thrives on control and mystery, is suddenly forced to elaborate, to fill the silence they once used against you. This technique works because deception feeds on simplicity. Manipulators use vague statements, emotional hooks, and authority tones to make you stop thinking. But an open question flips that dynamic. It makes them think, clarify, and justify. Each additional word they speak increases the chance they'll contradict themselves or reveal their true motive. Psychologically, open questions engage the prefrontal cortex, the rational, analytical part of your brain. They slow emotional reaction and activate curiosity instead of fear. You go from being defensive to being investigative, and that subtle shift disarms manipulation instantly. It's the calm curiosity of someone who refuses to be cornered. When you ask open questions, you're not confronting, you're guiding. You give the other person room to reveal themselves, and they almost always do. A manipulator craves quick compliance. Your calm curiosity feels like quicksand beneath their feet. The more you make them explain, the more their power dissolves. In conversation, knowledge is leverage, and every open question you ask quietly moves that leverage back into your hands. Spot false choices. Manipulators love to trap you between two doors, both leading exactly where they want you to go. This is the illusion of control, the false choice. It sounds like freedom, but it's a psychological cage. Are you going to help me or let me down? Do you want to be part of the team or not? These are not real options. They are emotional handcuffs designed to limit your thinking and rush your decision. When you learn to spot false choices, you dismantle one of manipulation's favorite weapons. You stop accepting the frame they've built and create your own. Instead of choosing between their two options, you step back and ask, why are those my only choices? That question alone shatters the illusion. Suddenly, you're no longer reacting. You're observing. You're seeing the strings instead of being pulled by them. Psychologically, false choices exploit a cognitive bias, the brain's need for quick resolution. Under pressure, we prefer a bad choice to no choice. Manipulators know this and use it to corner you, but awareness freezes that impulse. You reclaim time, perspective, and authority. Spotting false choices turns you from a participant into a strategist. You begin to notice how people use limited framing to steer behavior. Politicians, salespeople, even friends and partners. The real power is realizing you can always step outside the frame entirely. You don't have to pick a door someone else built. You can build your own, and that's where freedom begins. Admit what you don't know. There's a quiet kind of power in saying, I don't know. It's the phrase manipulators fear most because it cannot be twisted. When you admit what you don't know, you remove their favorite tool, shame. They can't trap you in the illusion of ignorance if you've already owned it. They can't control you through fear of looking foolish if you've made peace with uncertainty. Honesty disarms deceit faster than confrontation ever could. Manipulators thrive on pretending to know everything. They pressure, bluff, and dominate conversations by creating an aura of authority. But when you calmly say, I'm not sure about that, you break their rhythm. You signal that you don't chase validation, you chase truth. It's not ignorance, it's intellectual integrity. And people who think for themselves can't be easily led. Psychologically, admitting what you don't know rewires the brain for humility over ego. It shifts you from defensive to receptive, from reactive to analytical. Instead of pretending, you pause. Instead of fearing judgment, you welcome clarity. This opens space for genuine learning while exposing manipulation built on false certainty. Those who seek to control you rely on your need to appear competent or agreeable. The moment you drop that mask, they lose leverage. I don't know becomes your boundary. It says, I will not fake understanding just to keep peace. In that honesty lies freedom. Because when you stop fearing what you don't know, no one can use it against you again. State consequences. Calmly. True power is quiet. When you state consequences calmly, without anger or threat, you move from reacting to leading. Manipulators expect emotional outbursts. They feed on drama, guilt, and chaos. But when you look someone in the eye and say, "If this continues, I'll have to step back," with steady composure, it unsettles them more than any shout ever could. Calmness signals certainty. It tells them your decision isn't emotional, it's final. Manipulators rely on the illusion that you won't follow through. They test limits inch by inch to see where you break. By clearly naming the consequence, you take away their testing ground. You make the invisible boundary visible, and you back it with quiet conviction. No threats, no warnings, just truth. And truth, delivered without emotion, hits harder than anger ever will. Psychologically, calm consequence setting rewires your nervous system away from fear-based responses. Instead of fighting or freezing, you assert control through clarity. This signals both to your mind and to the other person that your boundaries are real, measurable, and non-negotiable. When you can state what will happen next without trembling or rage, you become unmanipulable. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're informing them of reality. And manipulators fear reality because they can't twist it. The calmness in your tone tells them you've already made peace with your decision. That's the moment they realize they've lost control. Ask for more time. Manipulators thrive on urgency. They know that rushed minds make reckless decisions. That's why they press hard, speak fast, and act like everything is an emergency. They want you cornered, tired, emotional, and desperate to say yes, just to make the pressure stop. But when you calmly say, "I need more time before I decide," you shatter their momentum. The illusion of urgency dies the moment you refuse to play by their tempo. Asking for more time is a quiet act of rebellion. It says, "I choose clarity over pressure." In that pause, your emotions settle, your thoughts align, and the truth starts to surface. What felt urgent begins to look unnecessary. What seemed obvious reveals its traps. Manipulators can't maintain power without speed. They need your instant compliance. By asking for more time, you rob them of their strongest weapon. Psychologically, time creates distance between impulse and action. It engages your logical brain, allowing emotion to cool and perspective to expand. You gain space to evaluate, consult others, and notice red flags that were invisible in the heat of the moment. The most dangerous word to a manipulator is later. It means you see through the spell they're trying to cast. It means their control no longer works. So when you feel the squeeze, don't react, delay, ask for more time, because in that pause, you don't just think clearer. You reclaim ownership of your choices, your pace, and your peace. Keep your tone level. Your tone is the emotional temperature of your power. When you keep it level, you take command of every interaction, even when the other person tries to drag you into chaos. Manipulators depend on emotional imbalance. They provoke, insult, or guilt you, hoping your voice will rise, crack, or falter. The moment it does, they've hooked you. But when your tone stays steady, calm, and unwavering, it's like holding up a mirror that reflects their instability back at them. A level tone doesn't mean emotionless. It means controlled. It tells the listener, "I am grounded. I am not moved by your tactics." That calm voice unsettles people who seek dominance because it denies them feedback. They want to hear anger, fear, or apology, proof that their manipulation is working. Instead, they hear nothing but poise, and in that silence between your words, they lose power. Psychologically, a level tone regulates your nervous system. It keeps your brain in logic mode rather than emotional reactivity. It slows your breathing, lowers your stress response, and signals confidence to your subconscious mind. People instinctively trust calm voices. They associate them with certainty and control. Keeping your tone even in heated moments creates an invisible authority. It makes others second-guess their aggression, forcing them to match your steadiness or risk looking unhinged. It's quiet dominance, the kind that needs no force, no volume, no threat. When your voice doesn't shake, neither does your power. Use open posture. Your body speaks long before your mouth does, and manipulators listen to it more than your words. When you adopt an open posture, shoulders relaxed, chest lifted, arms uncrossed, eyes steady, you send a clear, unspoken message. I'm confident, aware, and not easily swayed. Closed posture, on the other hand, folded arms, hunched back, downward gaze, signals submission and uncertainty. Manipulators sense that energy instantly. They read your body like a roadmap for control. Open posture rewires the power dynamic. It grounds you physically and psychologically, anchoring your presence in the moment. When you hold yourself tall and steady, you're not just projecting confidence, you're feeling it. The body informs the mind. Your physiology teaches your brain that you are safe and centered. That self-assurance disrupts manipulation before it even starts. Psychologically, posture shapes perception, both yours and theirs. People instinctively respect those who appear open and calm because it radiates emotional stability. It tells the manipulator that you won't be intimidated or coerced. It creates an invisible boundary around you, one made not of words but of energy. In tense moments, posture is silent resistance. It's how you say no without speaking. You stand tall, breathe slowly, hold eye contact, and let your stillness do the talking. Because when your body declares certainty, manipulation loses its target. Open posture is not arrogance. It's awareness made visible. Limit time with pushy people. Your energy is your most valuable currency, and pushy people are emotional thieves. They don't just want your attention. They want your availability, your compliance, your silence. Manipulators thrive on constant access. The more time they have with you, the more space they get to twist, guilt, or wear you down. But when you limit your time with them, deliberately, unapologetically, you cut off their oxygen supply. Control requires proximity. Distance kills manipulation. When you shorten interactions, every minute becomes a boundary. You stop giving them endless chances to convince you, explain themselves, or tug at your emotions. You begin to train both yourself and them to understand. My time is not yours to take. This quiet withdrawal of access is one of the most effective defenses you can use. It doesn't provoke confrontation, yet it dismantles their influence completely. Psychologically, limiting exposure creates emotional recovery space. It allows your nervous system to reset, your intuition to sharpen, and your self-respect to rebuild. Manipulative people use intensity as a smokescreen. When you remove their audience, their intensity deflates into nothing. You don't need dramatic exits or angry declarations. You simply become less available. Shorter calls, slower replies, polite excuses. The more consistent your distance, the weaker their grip becomes. Over time, they realize they can't reach you, not just physically, but emotionally. And in that calm separation, you reclaim something sacred, your peace. Requests clear alternatives. Manipulators thrive in narrow lanes. They want you to see only one path, their path. When you say, "What are the other options?" you tear down the illusion of inevitability. It's a simple question, but it forces the manipulator to reveal what they've been hiding, that there's almost always another choice, one they'd rather you never consider. Requesting clear alternatives breaks the trance of one-dimensional thinking and opens the door to true freedom. When someone pressures you to agree, they'll often frame their offer as the only logical outcome. There's really no other way. This is your only shot. These phrases are designed to compress your perspective, to make you surrender under the weight of urgency. But by calmly asking for alternatives, you disrupt their script. You make them think, explain, and expose the limits of their manipulation. If they can't provide another route, you've caught them in the act. Psychologically, Asking for alternatives activates your problem-solving mind and signals confidence. You're not trapped, you're evaluating. It also creates discomfort in the manipulator because it drags them out of emotional storytelling into logical reasoning, where deception is harder to sustain. Real power is not in rejecting the first option, but in refusing to believe it's the only one. The moment you ask for alternatives, you shift the balance of control. You stop being a pawn in someone else's game and become the player who sees the whole board. Confirm who, what, when. Clarity is your shield against manipulation. When you confirm who, what, and when, you anchor conversations in reality, a place manipulators hate to live. They thrive in vagueness, where promises blur and accountability disappears. But by calmly confirming the details, who's responsible, what's being agreed to, and when it's due, you transform words into structure. You take their smoke and turn it into something solid. Imagine someone saying, "Don't worry, I'll handle it soon." You respond, "Just to be clear, who's handling it, exactly what's being done, and by when?" That single question can dismantle an entire manipulation. It forces the other person to commit, to define, to reveal. The moment they're pinned to specifics, their wiggle room vanishes. Manipulators squirm when faced with facts. They prefer emotional confusion over concrete accountability. Psychologically, this habit rewires your brain for precision over assumption. It protects you from misplaced trust and future gaslighting because you have clear verbal records of what was said. It also trains your mind to pause and verify before investing time or emotion. You stop reacting and start documenting. The power of who, what, when lies in its simplicity. It doesn't accuse, it clarifies. It's not confrontational, it's intelligent. It shows you think systematically, not emotionally, and that makes you untouchable. Manipulators can't trap you in their chaos when every agreement has edges. Clarity is accountability, and accountability kills control. Use "I prefer." There is quiet power in saying "I prefer." It's firm without aggression, assertive without confrontation. Manipulators thrive on extremes. They want you submissive or explosive, apologetic or defensive. But "I prefer" sits perfectly in the middle, calm, self-possessed, and unarguable. It declares your boundary without provoking resistance. When you say "I prefer not to discuss that," or "I prefer to decide later," you communicate ownership of your choices while staying composed. Psychologically, this phrase rewires the interaction. Instead of justifying or explaining, you state a truth. Manipulators feed on explanations. They twist them, question them, use them against you. But preferences are personal. They require no defense. You shift the conversation from their agenda to your autonomy. It's not an attack, it's a statement of identity. "I prefer" also disarms emotional coercion. It softens the rejection while keeping it absolute. You're not saying no out of defiance, you're saying no because it doesn't align with your values or comfort. That subtle difference makes it powerful. It's non-negotiable, but graceful. Each time you use "I prefer," you remind both yourself and others that your voice belongs to you. You no longer react, you choose. You no longer explain, you express. And in that small, deliberate phrase lives one of the greatest acts of psychological self-defense, peaceful, unshakable self-respect. Ask for a demo. Deception hides best in theory. Manipulators love to talk big, promising miracles cloaked in confidence and charm. But the moment you say, "Show me," the illusion begins to crumble. Asking for a demo forces reality to enter the room. It transforms abstract persuasion into concrete proof, and proof is something most manipulators can't produce. They rely on your willingness to believe, not your insistence on seeing. When you request a demonstration, you shift the balance of power. Suddenly, the burden of credibility isn't on you, it's on them. They must deliver, perform, or reveal the truth behind their words. And when they can't, their influence fades fast. This is the quiet genius of skepticism. It doesn't attack, it observes. You're not arguing or accusing, you're inviting evidence. Manipulators hate evidence because it kills ambiguity, and ambiguity is their favorite weapon. Psychologically, asking for a demo activates your rational filter. It keeps you grounded in logic when emotion tries to take over. It's a way of saying, I trust my eyes more than your words. And that mindset makes you unshakable. A real professional welcomes the chance to demonstrate. They have nothing to hide. But a manipulator will stall, redirect, or drown you in excuses. Either way, you win. Truth reveals itself. In a world where talk is cheap and confidence is often counterfeit, the simplest test is still the strongest. Don't tell me, show me. Question fake urgency. Manipulators weaponize urgency because panic clouds judgment. They'll say, this is your last chance. You have to act now. Or, everyone else has already agreed. These are not facts. They're psychological traps designed to make you react, not think. When you stop and ask, why does this have to happen right now? You pierce their illusion of immediacy. Suddenly, their control begins to crumble because urgency only works when it's unquestioned. Fake urgency is a classic emotional manipulation tactic. It hijacks your survival instincts. Your brain reads time pressure as danger and rushes to relieve it by agreeing. But by pausing to question the rush, you reclaim clarity. True urgency can be explained logically. False urgency collapses under inquiry. The manipulator will grow defensive, vague, or impatient. Their insistence becomes their confession. Psychologically, slowing down under pressure rewires your emotional response. You signal to your nervous system that you are not prey. You teach your mind to separate adrenaline from action. This single question, why now, becomes a shield against exploitation because it forces truth to stand still long enough to be seen. Real urgency respects awareness. Fake urgency demands surrender. Those who truly value you will give you time to think because they care about your consent, not your compliance. Every moment you take to question false deadlines weakens manipulation's grip and strengthens your command. The calmest voice in the storm is always the one with real power. Name manipulation out loud. The moment you name manipulation, its power dies. When you calmly say, that feels like manipulation, or you're trying to guilt me, you rip the mask right off the game. Manipulators thrive in the dark. They rely on subtlety, confusion, and your silence. But once you expose what's happening, you shift the dynamic instantly. The tension flips and suddenly they feel seen, cornered, and powerless. Calling out manipulation isn't about confrontation. It's about illumination. Most manipulators expect you to shrink, to doubt your perception, to internalize their behavior as your fault. But when you describe it clearly, you reclaim control of the narrative. It's no longer their emotional play, it's your analysis of it. You turn their secret weapon into public evidence. Psychologically, naming behavior activates your prefrontal cortex, the logical center of the mind, while disabling their emotional control over you. You stop reacting to tone, guilt, or fear, and instead engage the part of your brain that recognizes patterns and motives. The act of naming transforms confusion into clarity, and clarity into strength. Manipulators often respond with denial, outrage, or laughter. That's proof you hit the mark. Stay calm. Don't argue. Just let the truth hang in the air where everyone can feel it. Once manipulation is exposed, it loses its invisibility. And without that, it has no grip. Naming it out loud isn't aggression, it's liberation. It's the moment you step out of their story and start writing your own. Make one decision at a time. Manipulators love chaos because confusion makes control easy. When they overwhelm you with multiple choices, urgent deadlines, emotional appeals, or layered requests, they're not giving you options. They're stealing your clarity. But when you make one decision at a time, you dismantle their strategy piece by piece. You slow the game, reclaim your focus, and remind yourself that your pace is your power. Each single decision is a line in the sand. It stops emotional flooding and brings your mind back to logic. Manipulators push for haste because haste breeds mistakes. The faster you move, the less you think, and the less you think, the easier you are to lead. But when you take things step by step, you turn their urgency into silence. You're no longer reacting, you're evaluating. That pause between decisions is where self-control lives. Psychologically, focusing on one choice at a time grounds you in the present moment. It prevents panic spirals and restores a sense of safety. Your brain can't process clearly under pressure. It needs order. One decision, then the next, builds that order and blocks manipulation at its root. When you choose deliberately, you radiate calm authority. People sense that you won't be rushed, cornered, or confused into compliance. You become immovable, steady in thought, unshaken by pressure. Making one decision at a time isn't slowness, it's mastery. It's how you turn emotional traps into clear, logical paths that lead only where you decide to go. Question fake urgency. Manipulators weaponize urgency because panic clouds judgment. They'll say, "This is your last chance. You have to act now," or "Everyone else has already agreed." These are not facts. They're psychological traps designed to make you react, not think. When you stop and ask, "Why does this have to happen right now?" you pierce their illusion of immediacy. Suddenly, their control begins to crumble because urgency only works when it's unquestioned. Fake urgency is a classic emotional manipulation tactic. It hijacks your survival instincts. Your brain reads time pressure as danger and rushes to relieve it by agreeing. But by pausing to question the rush, you reclaim clarity. True urgency can be explained logically. False urgency collapses under inquiry. The manipulator will grow defensive, vague, or impatient. Their insistence becomes their confession. Psychologically, slowing down under pressure rewires your emotional response. You signal to your nervous system that you are not prey. You teach your mind to separate adrenaline from action. This single question, "Why now?" becomes a shield against exploitation because it forces truth to stand still long enough to be seen. Real urgency respects awareness. Fake urgency demands surrender. Those who truly value you will give you time to think because they care about your consent, not your compliance. Every moment you take to question false deadlines weakens manipulation's grip and strengthens your command. The calmest voice in the storm is always the one with real power. Ask how success is measured. One of the sharpest ways to protect yourself from manipulation is to ask, how will success be measured? It sounds simple, but it's a scalpel that slices through vagueness and control. Manipulators use undefined expectations as traps. They promise reward, approval, or validation without ever explaining what you must do to earn it. The target keeps striving, guessing, exhausting themselves in pursuit of a moving finish line. But when you demand clear metrics, you expose the lie. This question shifts the frame from emotion to evidence. It forces the other person to define outcomes, not feelings. Be more committed becomes show up 5 minutes early. Do better becomes reach 20% growth. Once the terms are clear, manipulation loses its grip because measurable success can't be twisted or withheld for control. Psychologically, asking this question grounds you in logic. It tells your brain, "I choose objectivity over approval." It reactivates your sense of fairness and self-worth, which manipulators try to erode by keeping you in uncertainty. The clearer the measurement, the less room there is for emotional distortion. Those who seek control will often dodge, deflect, or redefine when you ask this. That's the tell. They never plan to play fair. But people who value truth will answer transparently. This single question protects your time, your energy, and your integrity. Because when success has a definition, no one else gets to rewrite it mid-game. Have them restate their claim. When someone's words feel slippery or too convenient, ask them to say it again. Having a person restate their claim forces truth into daylight. Manipulators rely on momentum. They rush through statements, bury contradictions, and depend on your emotional distraction to keep you from noticing. But when you calmly say, "Can you repeat that?" or "I want to make sure I heard you right. Could you restate that?" you halt their rhythm completely. The moment they have to repeat themselves, they must either clarify or expose the cracks in their story. Psychologically, this simple request triggers cognitive pressure. If the claim was exaggerated or deceptive, repetition feels heavy. It demands consistency the manipulator can't maintain. Honest people find restating easy. Liars stumble, reword, or retreat. You'll notice subtle shifts, nervous tone changes, new details, contradictions. Each one is a red flag revealing manipulation in real time. This technique also buys you something priceless: time. Time to think, to analyze, to breathe. It shifts you from emotional reaction to rational observation. You no longer chase their words. You make them slow down and stand by them. When you have someone restate their claim, you're not challenging them directly. You're inviting them to confirm their own truth. That soft form of accountability is devastating to deceit. It's polite, simple, and psychologically dominant, because in that moment, you're no longer the listener. They're the one under the microscope. Get neutral witnesses. Manipulators thrive in the dark, behind closed doors, in private conversations, and whispered words where truth can't be verified. Their greatest weapon is isolation, because when no one else sees or hears what happens, they can rewrite the story at will. But when you bring in neutral witnesses, you drag their game into the light, and suddenly their power begins to evaporate. Asking for a third party, copying others in an email, or simply ensuring conversations happen in shared spaces creates a silent accountability. Manipulators lose their edge when they know someone else is watching, someone who has nothing to gain by taking sides. Their tone softens, their tactics weaken, and their misunderstandings mysteriously disappear. Transparency terrifies those who build control through secrecy. Psychologically, having a witness protects your mind as much as your reputation. It keeps you grounded in reality when the manipulator tries to distort it. You're no longer trapped in their narrative because there's proof, perspective, and shared memory. That outside presence acts like an emotional anchor, keeping you steady when they try to gaslight or guilt you. You don't need to announce it with confrontation, just quietly involve others. Let's include Sarah in this discussion. Can we document this agreement? Simple, factual steps that cut through manipulation like sunlight through smoke. In the presence of neutrality, lies lose their color, and when truth is no longer something that can be twisted in private, the manipulator's stage collapses, because an audience that sees clearly is their greatest fear. Take notes during talks. Manipulators fear documentation. When you take notes during a conversation, you introduce something they can't easily control: accountability. Writing things down shifts the power balance immediately. It tells the other person that their words are being recorded, remembered, and can be referenced later. Suddenly, they lose the freedom to twist the narrative or rewrite history. Every sentence they speak becomes something they may have to stand by, and that terrifies anyone who manipulates through distortion. Taking notes does more than protect you. It grounds you. It keeps your focus on facts, not emotions. Manipulators thrive on emotional turbulence. They want you too overwhelmed to process details. But when you calmly jot down what's being said, your mind moves from reactive to analytical. You're signaling to yourself, I am in control here. I am observing, not absorbing. Psychologically, note-taking triggers detachment. You become the witness, not the participant. This distance weakens emotional hooks like guilt, flattery, or pressure. It also makes it far easier to spot contradictions later when their words and actions no longer align. In professional or personal settings, notes act as a quiet armor. You don't have to argue or confront, you simply document. That alone can deter manipulation because deceit cannot thrive in the light of recorded truth. Each word you capture is a reminder that you are not easily swayed, not easily fooled, and never unprepared. Track all promises. Memory is the battlefield where manipulators win. They twist timelines, reframe words, and gaslight you into questioning what was ever agreed upon. But when you track all promises, you move the fight from memory to record, writing down commitments, who said what, when, and under what terms, turns manipulation into accountability. It transforms fleeting words into evidence, and evidence cannot be argued with. Manipulators survive on plausible deniability. They rely on you forgetting details, second-guessing yourself, or hesitating to confront them. But when you calmly say, just to confirm you agreed to finish this by Friday, right? Or you document it in a message, the power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they're no longer steering the narrative. You are. The record becomes your armor. Psychologically, keeping written proof quiets the anxiety that manipulators cultivate. You no longer spiral through doubt or replay conversations in your head. You have facts. You have timestamps. You have truth. This builds inner peace and outer authority. It tells your subconscious mind, I'm safe because I have evidence. Those who act with integrity welcome documentation. Those who manipulate will call it distrustful. That reaction reveals everything. Tracking promises isn't paranoia, it's protection. It's the difference between being controlled by confusion and controlling your own clarity. In the end, written words are power, and the moment you start recording them, no one can rewrite your reality again. Practice saying no. The word no is small but revolutionary. It's the boundary that separates your freedom from someone else's control. Manipulators count on your discomfort with rejection. They know that hesitation, guilt, or fear of conflict will make you say yes when your soul screams no. That's why learning to say it confidently, clearly, and calmly is one of the strongest psychological defenses you can develop. Every no you speak without apology is a declaration of self-respect. Practicing no isn't just about refusing requests. It's about rewiring your nervous system to stop equating refusal with danger. Many people were trained to believe that saying no means being rude, selfish, or unkind. Manipulators exploit that conditioning, using guilt and emotional pressure to make you compliant. But each time you practice no in front of a mirror, in low-stakes situations, or in your head, you train your body to stay calm under pressure. The word becomes less like confrontation and more like breathing. Psychologically, no creates space for clarity. It filters out manipulation, obligation, and false urgency, leaving only what truly aligns with you. People who respect you will accept your boundaries, those who don't reveal their true colors. Saying no is not defiance, it's direction. It's how you protect your energy, your time, and your truth. Every time you use it, your spine straightens a little more, your voice steadies, and your mind remembers. Peace begins where unnecessary yeses end. Default to I'll pass. I'll pass is a shield disguised as politeness. It's short, neutral, and impossible to argue with. Manipulators crave emotional hooks, reasons to pull you into debate, guilt, or justification. But when your default response to pressure is a calm, simple I'll pass, you leave them with nothing to grab. It's a verbal boundary that ends the conversation without inviting a fight. This phrase works because it's emotionally clean. It carries no defensiveness, no apology, and no invitation for persuasion. No can sometimes trigger confrontation, but I'll pass slides through with quiet grace. It communicates self-control without sounding cold. You're not rejecting the person, you're rejecting the manipulation, and you're doing it with elegance. Psychologically, this default rewires your mind from people-pleasing to self-preservation. It buys you time to think before committing and trains your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. You stop over-explaining and start owning your choices. The more you use it, the more power it holds. Manipulators often mistake kindness for weakness. "I'll pass" proves them wrong. It's polite, final, and deeply unsettling to those who rely on your compliance. You don't owe them justification. You owe yourself peace. Every time you use those two words, you reinforce the truth that your decisions belong to you and no one else. Share little online. The more you reveal, the easier you are to read and to manipulate. Every post, photo, or opinion you share becomes a breadcrumb for someone looking to understand your fears, values, and weaknesses. Manipulators study what you give away. They analyze your tone, your patterns, the things you defend, and the things you desire. When you share too much, you hand them a map of your emotions. But when you share little, you become a mystery, and mystery is power. The digital world rewards oversharing, convincing you that visibility equals connection. But the truth is, privacy equals freedom. When you limit what others know about your life, you make it impossible for them to build emotional leverage against you. They can't use your dreams to bait you or your insecurities to trap you. The less you expose, the less they can exploit. Psychologically, restraint creates control. It tells your subconscious that you decide what others see, not the other way around. It preserves your sense of autonomy in a world obsessed with validation. You stop chasing approval and start protecting peace. Manipulators crave data. They can't twist what they don't know. Every withheld detail becomes armor. Every secret kept a shield. In a world where everyone is screaming to be seen, the quiet ones are untouchable, because the moment you stop broadcasting your life, you start owning it. Keep private notes. Your mind is powerful, but memory is fragile, and manipulators know that. They exploit confusion, half-remembered details, and emotional fog to rewrite history in their favor. That's why keeping private notes is one of the most quietly powerful defenses you can build. When you document what was said, how you felt, and what really happened, you create a record of truth untouched by their distortion. It's your private sanctuary of clarity in a world that tries to twist perception. Writing things down transforms chaos into order. It pulls emotions out of your head and onto the page, where they can't be weaponized against you. A manipulator can argue with your feelings, but they can't erase what you've written in ink. Over time, those notes become a pattern map. You start seeing cycles, tactics, and repeated behaviors that once hid behind excuses. Psychologically, private notes anchor your sense of reality. They protect you from gaslighting and emotional erosion. They remind you of the facts when guilt or confusion clouds your judgment. Reading your own words later often reveals what your emotions sensed before your mind could articulate it, that something was deeply off. Manipulators hate documentation because it kills their advantage. They rely on selective memory and emotional control, not evidence. But when you have notes, dates, quotes, and observations, you hold the proof they can't bend. Keep them hidden, keep them safe, and keep them honest. In the end, your notebook becomes more than paper. It becomes armor. Ask 5 clarifiers. Clarity is the enemy of manipulation. When you train yourself to ask 5 clarifying questions before agreeing, committing, or reacting, you destroy confusion, the manipulator's favorite weapon. Most people fall into traps not because they're weak, but because they assume they understand what's being asked. Manipulators exploit that assumption. They use vague language, emotional framing, and incomplete details to get silent consent. But when you calmly keep asking, "Can you explain that further? What do you mean by that? Who exactly will be involved? Wait, when would this, what's the goal here?" Their fog evaporates. Psychologically, each clarifying question pulls the conversation from emotional impulse into logical terrain. It forces the other person to define, specify, and expose their real intentions. You're not interrogating, you're observing. You're showing that your decisions are based on precision, not pressure. Manipulators hate this because every clarification steals a piece of their control. They rely on ambiguity. You thrive on accuracy. By the fifth clarifier, the truth usually reveals itself. Either the person becomes transparent, or they grow irritated, defensive, and evasive, revealing that their motives were never pure. In that moment, you don't even need confrontation. Their behavior tells you everything. The habit of asking 5 clarifiers turns you into a mirror of reason. It buys you time, protects your peace, and trains your mind to seek truth over tension. Because every manipulator depends on your quick agreement, and every wise person learns that clarity is the calmest form of power. Say, "Show me." "Show me" is the phrase that separates truth from performance. Manipulators build castles out of words, grand claims, promises, and emotional appeals that sound convincing but collapse under evidence. When you calmly say, "Show me," you strip away illusion and demand reality. You shift the burden of proof from belief to demonstration, and that shift changes everything. Most manipulators rely on trust without verification. They expect you to take their confidence as credibility. But "show me" cuts through the charm, the emotion, and the pressure. It requires something real: data, action, results. And reality is the one place a manipulator can't fake for long. This simple request punctures their narrative like a pin through a balloon. Psychologically, "show me" activates logical thinking and grounds you in observation rather than emotion. It stops the automatic reflex to agree or sympathize and redirects your focus to evidence. It keeps your brain cool while theirs scrambles for validation. A manipulator can argue with your feelings, but not with facts that don't exist. Those two words, steady, neutral, unbothered, carry immense weight. You're not accusing, you're inviting proof. You're not emotional, you're exact. And that calm demand for substance is lethal to deceit. When you say, "Show me," you reclaim control of the narrative. You remind them and yourself that reality doesn't need to be sold. It only needs to be seen. Notice compliments before asks. Flattery is the velvet glove that hides the iron hand of manipulation. When someone praises you just before making a request, it's rarely pure admiration. It's strategy. "You're so reliable. Could you take care of this for me?" "You're the best at this. I'd really appreciate your help." Compliments like these are not gifts. They are tools designed to soften your defenses and make compliance feel like gratitude. The human mind is wired to crave validation. Compliments trigger dopamine, lowering skepticism and heightening our desire to reciprocate. Manipulators know this well. They use praise to bypass logic and access emotion. But when you begin to notice the timing of a compliment, the spell breaks. You no longer feel the automatic pull to repay flattery with obedience. Instead, you see the compliment for what it is, a key they're trying to use to unlock your boundaries. Psychologically, awareness rewires response. You can still accept praise, but without surrendering your discernment. True compliments come freely, unanchored to favors. Manipulative ones arrive with a hook hidden behind a smile. When you recognize that pattern, you stop being emotionally predictable. The power is not in rejecting kindness, but in reading intent. Once you learn to spot the compliment before the ask, you'll see how many people use charm as currency. And when you no longer buy it, you become immune to the sweet poison of strategic praise. Beware flattery plus urgency. When someone flatters you and pressures you at the same time, stop immediately. That combination, praise followed by haste, is one of the oldest manipulation traps in existence. It sounds like admiration, but it's really a leash. "You're the only one I trust with this." You're amazing. Just sign this now before someone else takes it. Flattery disarms your skepticism, while urgency disables your logic. Together, they short-circuit your defenses and push you into choices you wouldn't make in the calm light of reason. Manipulators understand that your brain loves rewards. Compliments trigger dopamine, the feel-good chemical that makes you crave more approval. Add time pressure, and your rational mind is shoved aside by the fear of losing that validation. You rush to keep the admiration alive, signing, agreeing, helping, giving, before you've even asked why. Psychologically, this tactic hijacks your need to belong and be valued. It weaponizes kindness. You start believing you're special, chosen, or indispensable, when in truth, you're being rushed into compliance. The faster they want you to decide, the more likely they're hiding something. The antidote is awareness. When praise and pressure appear together, treat it as a red alert. Real respect never demands speed. Genuine opportunity doesn't require flattery. Step back, breathe, and let the urgency die in silence. If the compliment was sincere, it will still be true tomorrow. If it wasn't, you just dodged a bullet aimed straight at your trust. Ask about pros and cons. Manipulators thrive in one-sided conversations. They present only the glitter, never the cost. When you ask about pros and cons, you force balance into a space built on bias. This simple question, what are the downsides, cuts straight through emotional persuasion and exposes hidden motives. It halts the trance of excitement or guilt they try to create and shifts the energy from feeling to thinking. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about their urgency, it's about your awareness. Psychologically, this technique pulls you into critical thinking mode. It activates logic over emotion, curiosity over compliance. By asking about both sides, you force the manipulator to confront the reality they're trying to hide. Honest people will welcome that question. Deceptive ones will dodge it, minimize risks, or attack your skepticism. Their reaction becomes your revelation. When you inquire about pros and cons, you're not doubting, you're discerning. You teach others that you value full perspective, not selective truth. It also gives you time to breathe, to evaluate, and to detach from emotional hooks like flattery or fear. Each pro and con you uncover builds an invisible shield of awareness between you and manipulation. This question may sound simple, but it's powerful. It demands honesty without hostility and clarity without conflict. It transforms you from a passive listener into an active decision maker, because those who ask about the cost of every promise never end up paying the hidden price. Get second opinions. Manipulators count on isolation. They want you to trust only their version of the story, their urgency, their expertise, their emotional narrative. The moment you bring in a second opinion, their influence starts to crumble. Seeking another perspective breaks the spell of emotional control because it forces their truth to compete with someone else's reality. And manipulators hate comparison. It exposes the cracks in their story. When you say, "Let me run this by someone I trust," you take back authority. You're no longer trapped inside their carefully constructed bubble of persuasion. You introduce logic, distance, and objectivity. Suddenly, the manipulator has to deal with a new variable, one they can't control. That alone often makes them retreat. Psychologically, getting second opinions protects you from cognitive distortion, the mental fog that emotional pressure creates. Another voice, detached from the heat of the situation, can see patterns you can't. It gives you grounding when your instincts are clouded by guilt, fear, or confusion. The more perspectives you gather, the harder it becomes for anyone to trap you in theirs. Strong people don't fear feedback. They seek it. Manipulators, on the other hand, will rush you to decide, discourage questions, or make you feel disloyal for asking others. That's your warning sign. Because truth survives scrutiny, lies don't. When you make it a habit to get second opinions, you become untouchable, anchored not in emotion, but in collective clarity. always have a plan B. Dependence is the manipulator's playground. When you have no alternative, they own the outcome. But when you always have a plan B, you become untouchable. A backup plan isn't just about practicality, it's psychological armor. It tells your subconscious, I have options. I am not trapped. That mindset alone changes how you move, speak, and negotiate. People sense when you need them and when you don't. The first makes you pray, the second makes you power. Manipulators feed on desperation. They thrive when you believe that one path, one person, or one opportunity is your only shot. That belief makes you pliable, easy to bend. But the moment you prepare another route, their control evaporates. You stop reacting out of fear and start responding out of freedom. Plan B doesn't even need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. Its presence rewires your sense of safety. Psychologically, alternatives reduce anxiety and strengthen assertiveness. You speak more confidently because you know your stability doesn't depend on anyone's approval. You negotiate harder, say no easier, and walk away faster. A manipulator's power ends where your options begin. Having a plan B is not pessimism, it's self-respect. It's the silent assurance that your life is too valuable to hinge on one door or one person. When you know you can survive without their only way, you reclaim the rarest kind of freedom, the freedom of not needing permission to choose yourself. Reject fake deadlines. Nothing fuels manipulation like the illusion of urgency. You have to decide right now. This offer expires in an hour. Everyone else already agreed. These are the words of someone trying to corner you, not empower you. Fake deadlines are psychological traps designed to shut down your thinking and trigger your fear of loss. The moment you feel rushed, you stop analyzing, you react, and that's exactly what manipulators want. Rejecting fake deadlines means reclaiming your pace. When you calmly say, if the opportunity disappears because I take time to decide, it was never real, you pull the plug on their pressure. It's not defiance, it's discernment. True urgency is verifiable. False urgency is emotional theater. And when you refuse to play along, the manipulator's performance collapses. Psychologically, this tactic exploits scarcity bias, the fear that waiting will cost you something valuable. But time is clarity, and anyone who denies you time denies you truth. By slowing down, you give your prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making part of your brain, room to breathe. You move from panic to perspective. Those who deal in honesty will never punish you for needing time to think. Only deceivers demand immediate trust. So the next time someone says, you'll miss your chance, smile and step back. The only thing you'll miss by rejecting fake deadlines is regret. Use cool-off periods. Manipulators rush you because haste is their weapon. They know that urgency clouds judgment, and when emotions spike, whether excitement, fear, or guilt, you're easier to control. But when you use a cool-off period, you take back time, the one resource that exposes every hidden intention. Saying, let me think about it, or I'll get back to you tomorrow, breaks the trance of emotional manipulation and replaces it with clarity. Time cools persuasion. It allows your nervous system to settle, your logic to return, and your intuition to speak. Manipulators hate this pause because their influence depends on immediacy. They need you to act before you question. When you delay, the spell breaks. They lose momentum, and you regain power. Psychologically, cool-off periods activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reason and long-term thinking. It pulls you out of the emotional brain that reacts to pressure. In that space of delay, you can analyze motives, compare options, or simply feel if something aligns with your integrity. Cool-off periods aren't avoidance. They're emotional self-defense. They say, I don't decide under duress. Whether it's a purchase, a promise, or a plea, giving yourself time makes manipulation impossible. Because truth can stand the weight, but deceit demands urgency. When you slow down, you don't just resist manipulation, you expose it. Expect fairness both ways. Manipulators love one-way streets. They want understanding without giving it, loyalty without earning it, and flexibility without ever returning the same courtesy. But when you quietly, firmly expect fairness both ways, you dismantle their favorite illusion that your empathy is infinite and theirs is optional. By demanding mutual respect, you transform from a target into an equal, and equality is the one dynamic manipulators can't survive in. When you say, "I'm happy to help if this is balanced," you force accountability into the interaction. It's not anger, it's alignment. You make it clear that reciprocity is the standard, not a request. Manipulators despise this because fairness traps them in a system they can't exploit. They thrive on guilt and imbalance. You thrive on truth and parity. The moment the scales even out, their advantage disappears. Psychologically, expecting fairness reprograms your subconscious to reject exploitation. It teaches your mind that your kindness doesn't owe anyone compliance. You stop overgiving and start measuring energy like value. This simple expectation protects you from subtle emotional debts, the kind that keep you saying yes long after you should have walked away. Fairness is not selfish, it's sacred balance. Healthy people are drawn to it, manipulators flee from it. When you hold fairness as a standard, not a favor, you send a clear message. I will meet you halfway, but never all the way at my own expense. That quiet equilibrium is the end of manipulation and the beginning of mutual respect. Refuse politely, not defensively. There is quiet power in a calm number. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactions. They want you flustered, guilty, or desperate to explain yourself. The more defensive you become, the deeper they sink their hooks. But when you refuse politely, you strip them of that energy completely. A measured, "I appreciate it, but I'll pass," is disarming. It gives them nothing to attack, no weakness to exploit, no emotion to manipulate. Defensiveness invites argument. Politeness ends it. When you justify your no, you hand them material to twist. They'll question your reasons, poke holes, and turn your words against you. But a polite refusal closes that door with grace. It's not cold, it's firm. It communicates self-respect without hostility, making it impossible for them to paint you as rude or unreasonable. Psychologically, a calm refusal activates boundaries without triggering guilt. It's the art of owning your decision while maintaining composure. You're not rejecting the person, you're honoring your limits. This keeps your emotions in your control, not theirs. Manipulators crave chaos. They feed on over-explaining, arguing, and defending. When you deny them that drama, they lose interest because they can't find a way in. A polite no is like emotional Teflon. Nothing sticks. You stay dignified, they stay powerless. And in that balance of grace and firmness lies a quiet, unshakable authority that few ever master. Use safe words in groups. Power plays don't just happen in private, they thrive in groups. Social manipulators use public pressure, ridicule, or emotional overwhelm to force compliance while everyone's watching. That's why having a safe word, a simple, pre-agreed phrase shared with trusted people, can be your invisible shield in chaotic moments. It's not childish, it's strategic. It signals distress, overload, or discomfort without confrontation, allowing allies to step in or shift the focus before the manipulator tightens their grip. Safe words work because they bypass the social paralysis that often freezes victims of public manipulation. When someone mocks, corners, or guilt trips you in front of others, your instinct is to stay polite. You smile, nod, or laugh it off while your boundaries crumble inside. But a safe word cuts through that paralysis. It's a silent alarm wrapped in calm language. It tells your support system, something isn't right. Help me anchor. Psychologically, this method activates safety and control in moments when your body feels trapped. It restores agency without escalation. It reminds your subconscious mind that you are not alone and that the crowd's energy doesn't dictate your voice. Manipulators lose their power the instant they realize your silence isn't isolation, it's communication. A safe word is not weakness, it's awareness turned into action. In a world where subtle coercion often hides behind laughter and charm, having that quiet signal can mean the difference between being cornered and being quietly rescued. Ignore herd pressure. Humans are wired to belong. That instinct, once vital for survival, now makes us dangerously easy to control. Manipulators exploit this by using herd pressure, the illusion that everyone else agrees, everyone else complies, everyone else believes. They say, everyone's doing it, no one else had a problem, or you don't want to be the only one who disagrees. It sounds harmless, but beneath it lies one of the most powerful psychological levers, fear of isolation. When you learn to ignore herd pressure, you reclaim your individuality and your power to think. Psychologically, the brain equates social rejection with physical pain. That's why the pull of conformity feels so strong. It triggers survival instincts. Manipulators know this and weaponize it. But when you step back, breathe, and observe the pattern, something shifts. You realize that belonging built on obedience isn't belonging at all. Real confidence is being willing to stand alone when the crowd is wrong. Ignoring herd pressure doesn't mean rejecting people. It means rejecting the illusion of consensus. You start asking, who benefits if everyone agrees? You recognize that most voices aren't independent. They're echoes. And when you stop needing their approval, their power over you evaporates. The moment you stop fearing exclusion, manipulation loses its sharpest edge. True strength is quiet defiance, the courage to trust your judgment when the room disagrees. Because history has proven one thing: the crowd is loud, but it's rarely right. Spot, everyone's doing it. The phrase, everyone's doing it, is one of the oldest tricks in psychological manipulation, a pressure disguised as belonging. It taps into a primal fear, the fear of being left out, of standing apart from the group. Manipulators use this to override your reason with emotion, to make you trade your judgment for acceptance. But the moment you spot that phrase, the spell breaks. You see the tactic for what it is, a shortcut to your conformity. When someone tells you everyone's doing it, what they're really saying is, don't think, just follow. They're weaponizing social proof, betting that your instinct to fit in will outweigh your instinct to question. But when you pause and ask, who exactly is everyone? Or, why does that matter? You expose the emptiness of their argument. Manipulators crumble under scrutiny because their crowd is often imaginary, a smokescreen built to rush your consent. Psychologically, recognizing this tactic strengthens your individuality. It activates critical thinking over social anxiety. You stop measuring safety by how many people agree and start measuring it by whether it aligns with your truth. The ability to resist group pressure is one of the purest forms of self-mastery. Most people fear standing alone. Manipulators count on that, but solitude in truth is far safer than company in deceit. When you can spot the everyone's doing it trap and stand still while the crowd moves, you become the rarest kind of person, the one who can't be herded. Demand clear criteria. Ambiguity is the manipulator's fog. It keeps you guessing while they move the goalposts. When you ask, what exactly are the criteria, you burn that fog away with precision. Vague expectations are a trap because they can always be redefined to make you feel like you failed. But clear criteria pin down accountability. They force the manipulator to reveal their standards before you act, leaving no room for revision, guilt, or gaslighting later. Manipulators thrive on shifting definitions of success. That's not what I meant. You didn't do it right. These are weapons of control. When you demand clarity, you take those weapons away. You turn the conversation from emotional to factual, from subjective to measurable. Suddenly, every claim, request, and criticism must stand on structure, not manipulation. Psychologically, clear criteria protect your confidence. They prevent self-doubt from taking root because you know what's expected, and when it's met, you can see it plainly. It transforms chaos into control. Manipulators, on the other hand, despise this structure because it limits their ability to twist meaning. Demanding criteria doesn't make you difficult, it makes you disciplined. It tells people you won't chase approval in a maze of shifting rules. You deal in truth, not tension. When expectations are defined, fairness becomes non-negotiable, and that's the one battlefield manipulators cannot win on. Verify identities. Deception begins where certainty ends. Manipulators, scammers, and emotional predators all share one tactic. They count on you to assume. They want you to trust a name, a tone, a story, without ever checking if the person behind it is real. That's why the rule is simple. Always verify identities. Whether it's an email, a text, a business offer, or even someone claiming emotional intimacy, pause and confirm who you're truly dealing with. The cost of blind trust is always higher than the discomfort of asking questions. Manipulators weaponize familiarity. They mimic authority, borrow credibility, and create false urgency to make you act before you verify. It's me, just send it quickly. We spoke last week, remember? These scripts work because they prey on your instinct to avoid offense, but asking, "Can you confirm who you are?" or checking through a second channel instantly cracks the illusion. Real people won't be insulted by caution. Liars will. Psychologically, verification re-engages your critical mind. It interrupts emotional momentum, the rush of trust, fear, or empathy that manipulators engineer. It forces your brain to pause and analyze instead of obey. Each moment you spend confirming identity reclaims control from someone who thrives on deception. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Verification isn't paranoia, it's self-respect. In an age where manipulation can wear any face, your skepticism is not cynicism, it's survival. Verify first, believe later, because the only person who fears the truth of their identity is the one who's hiding it. Ask who benefits. Every manipulation has a purpose, and asking who benefits shines a cold, clean light on it. This question slices through charm, guilt, and persuasion by revealing the hidden engine behind every request, rumor, or favor. Manipulators often wrap their intentions in kindness or urgency. They make their gain look like your duty. But when you pause and ask, "Who benefits if I do this?" you unmask the motive they never wanted you to see. Psychologically, this question triggers analytical thinking and kills emotional impulse. It moves your mind from reacting to reasoning. You start tracing the invisible lines of power. Who gains control? Who gets credit? Who saves face? Who profits from your effort or silence? Manipulators depend on you not asking this. They want you focused on the surface, their words, their tone, their flattery. But this question drags the spotlight behind the curtain. When you start seeing intent, manipulation loses its magic. Suddenly, helping looks like exploitation, urgent opportunities look like traps, and "we're all in this together" sounds like a lie. You realize that genuine collaboration is mutual. It uplifts both sides, not just one. Asking who benefits doesn't make you cynical, it makes you conscious. It transforms naivety into discernment. The world doesn't always reveal its motives, but this question does. And once you train your mind to ask it automatically, no manipulator, no matter how smooth, can ever blind you again. Keep a decision journal. Memory is fragile, and manipulators know it. They twist timelines, rewrite conversations, and make you question what really happened. A decision journal is your shield against that fog. By writing down what you decided, when, and why, you reclaim ownership of your own narrative. It's not just paper and ink, it's clarity, made permanent. When your emotions settle, your words remain, and those words become proof against distortion. Keeping a record forces reflection. It slows you down before choices harden into consequences. Manipulators want you impulsive, reacting, agreeing before you can think. But journaling demands that you pause and reason. Each entry is a moment of power, proof that your choices come from thought, not pressure. When you revisit those pages later, you'll often see the pattern. Who made you rush? Who made you doubt? Who made you feel small before saying yes? Psychologically, writing externalizes confusion. It transfers chaos from your head to the page, where it can't haunt you. You start to recognize emotional manipulation not as fate, but as a cycle you can track and stop. It trains your mind to separate impulse from intention, reaction from response. A decision journal isn't just a record, it's armor. It holds your truth steady when someone tries to rewrite it. Over time, it becomes a quiet map of growth and self-trust, because once you can see your own patterns, no one can use them against you again. Keep a decision journal. Memory is fragile, and manipulators know it. They twist timelines, rewrite conversations, and make you question what really happened. A decision journal is your shield against that fog. By writing down what you decided, when and why, you reclaim ownership of your own narrative. It's not just paper and ink, it's clarity made permanent. When your emotions settle, your words remain, and those words become proof against distortion. Keeping a record forces reflection. It slows you down before choices harden into consequences. Manipulators want you impulsive, reacting, agreeing before you can think. But journaling demands that you pause and reason. Each entry is a moment of power, proof that your choices come from thought, not pressure. When you revisit those pages later, you'll often see the pattern. Who made you rush? Who made you doubt? Who made you feel small before saying yes? Psychologically, writing externalizes confusion. It transfers chaos from your head to the page, where it can't haunt you. You start to recognize emotional manipulation not as fate, but as a cycle you can track and stop. It trains your mind to separate impulse from intention, reaction from response. A decision journal isn't just a record, it's armor. It holds your truth steady when someone tries to rewrite it. Over time, it becomes a quiet map of growth and self-trust, because once you can see your own patterns, no one can use them against you again. Learn persuasion tactics. Knowledge is the antidote to manipulation. When you learn how persuasion works, you stop being unconsciously influenced by it. Every word, gesture, and tone used in persuasion follows psychological patterns: reciprocity, scarcity, authority, liking, social proof, and consistency. Manipulators exploit these triggers to make people comply without realizing they've been guided. But once you recognize these tactics, you start to see the strings before they pull. Understanding persuasion doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. You begin to notice when flattery is timed too perfectly, when urgency feels forced, or when someone uses emotional language to bypass logic. You stop reacting automatically because you can name the technique in play. Naming breaks the spell. It's like seeing the magician's wires. You can still enjoy the show, but you'll never believe the illusion again. Psychologically, awareness flips power. Instead of being influenced, you become the observer, the one who notices tone shifts, mirrored body language, and attempts to build false rapport. You start hearing manipulation in the spaces between words, and the moment you can identify the tactic, it loses control over you. Learning persuasion is not about manipulating others, it's about building immunity. You understand human behavior deeply enough to move through it untouched. In a world where influence is currency, those who recognize the pattern cannot be bought. Awareness doesn't just protect you, it frees you. Use measurable data. Facts are the enemy of manipulation. When you use measurable data, you trade emotion for evidence, and evidence is the one thing a manipulator can't twist without being exposed. Numbers, records, timestamps, screenshots. These are truth's armor. They don't bend to tone or persuasion. They don't guilt, flatter, or argue. They simply are. And when you build your reasoning on data instead of feelings, manipulators lose their strongest weapon, emotional distortion. Manipulators thrive in the abstract. They use words like always, never, everyone thinks, to inflate guilt and shrink your confidence. But when you counter with specifics, actually, this happened twice last month, not always. The fog clears instantly. Facts break hypnosis. They anchor reality back where it belongs. Psychologically, measurable data activates analytical thinking and weakens emotional reactivity. It shifts your brain from the limbic system, where fear and guilt live, to the prefrontal cortex, where logic rules. This transition doesn't just protect your decisions, it rewires your self-trust. You begin to rely on proof, not persuasion. Data is unemotional. That's its strength. It doesn't care who's louder, who's charming, or who's angry. It speaks in consistency. And in a world full of emotional manipulators and half-truths, consistency is power. So when someone tries to bend your reality, bring the numbers, bring the receipts, because feelings can be faked, but facts can't bleed. Sleep on big choices. Manipulators fear time because time dissolves illusion. When you sleep on big choices, you protect yourself from the most dangerous influence tactic of all, urgency. They'll tell you it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that waiting means losing everything, that deciding now proves your loyalty. But emotion clouds judgment, and exhaustion makes you easy to steer. One night of rest can turn what felt like destiny into what it truly is, pressure disguised as importance. Psychologically, sleep resets the brain's emotional balance. During rest, your subconscious sifts through details your waking mind missed, revealing truths hidden under adrenaline or charm. By morning, what once felt magnetic may feel manipulative. That clarity isn't coincidence. It's your intuition freed from someone else's pace. When you delay big decisions, you silently assert power. You say, I choose my timeline, not yours. Manipulators thrive on immediacy because it stops reflection. The second you refuse their tempo, their influence weakens. The fog lifts, and you see motives, inconsistencies, and consequences with frightening clarity. Sleeping on choices is not hesitation, it's self-respect in action. It's how strong minds protect themselves from emotional traps dressed as opportunities, because truth doesn't fear time, only lies do. And when you wake with calm certainty instead of pressure, you'll know exactly which it was. Say, let's pause here. Manipulators thrive on momentum. They talk fast, push urgency, and flood you with emotion so you don't have time to think. Their greatest fear is stillness, because stillness breaks the spell. When you say, let's pause here, you seize control of the tempo. You halt the emotional storm and reclaim your space to breathe, to observe, to decide. That single sentence flips the dynamic from reactive to reflective, and suddenly, you're the one setting the pace. This phrase is disarming because it's calm, not confrontational. You're not arguing. You're interrupting the trance of persuasion. Manipulators rely on keeping you off balance. Pausing recenters you instantly. It's the psychological equivalent of hitting the brakes on a runaway car. The rush loses power, the silence widens, and truth starts to echo louder than emotion. Psychologically, let's pause here, activates your logical mind. It breaks the fight or flight loop and gives your brain space to process. It tells both your body and the manipulator that you won't be swept away by pressure. That quiet confidence is unsettling to anyone trying to control you. They can't manipulate what they can't rush. You don't need anger or justification, just those three words, steady and unhurried. Let's pause here. It's the verbal signal that you're done dancing to someone else's rhythm, because when you control the pace, you control the outcome, and no manipulator can operate in the presence of calm. Insist on equal terms. Manipulators thrive where imbalance lives. They want you giving more, apologizing more, bending more. Equality threatens them because it dismantles their leverage. When you calmly say, "Let's make sure this is fair for both of us," you shift the power dynamic instantly. It's not confrontation, it's alignment. It signals that you see through unspoken hierarchies and won't settle for being the one who sacrifices while they benefit. Equal terms are not about ego, they're about dignity. Manipulators survive on asymmetry. They create invisible debts, emotional or practical, to keep you compliant. But when you insist on balance, you close their favorite door, guilt. You refuse to owe them. You refuse to play the part of the good person who must prove worth through overgiving. Instead, you bring everything into the light and make fairness the rule, not the exception. Psychologically, insisting on equality strengthens self-worth. It reinforces the belief that your time, energy, and needs are just as valuable as anyone else's. It protects you from exploitation disguised as cooperation. And when someone resists fairness, when they get defensive at the mention of equal terms, you've already exposed their intent. Balance disarms manipulation. It removes emotional leverage and replaces it with accountability. The person who insists on fairness cannot be coerced. They can only be respected, because once equality becomes your standard, exploitation stops feeling like kindness. Treat unknown information as risky. The unknown is a manipulator's playground. When someone feeds you information that can't be verified, "I heard they said this. Trust me, I know people. It's confidential, but..." That's not knowledge, it's bait. Treating unknown information as risky is how you protect your mind from becoming someone else's tool. Manipulators use mystery to control your behavior, to make you act before you think, to plant doubt where none existed. The less you can confirm, the more power they have. When you assume unverified information is dangerous until proven otherwise, you turn the tables. You stop being their echo and start being the filter. You ask, "Where did this come from? Can I see proof? Why are you telling me this?" Each question cuts a string from their invisible web of influence. It forces them to reveal intent or retreat. Psychologically, this mindset rewires your trust reflex. It trains you to value certainty over curiosity, to pause before absorbing someone else's truth. The human brain craves closure. We want to believe stories that explain chaos. Manipulators exploit that craving, but by labeling all unverified claims as potential risks, you interrupt that automatic trust and force your logic to step in. Real information withstands scrutiny. Falsehoods crumble under it. In a world where rumors travel faster than facts, skepticism isn't cold, it's survival. So when something sounds urgent, secret, or too convenient to check, stop. Treat it like fire. Don't touch it until you know it's safe. Add your own options. Manipulators thrive on narrow frames. They box you in with false choices. You're either with me or against me. You can do this now or lose your chance forever. These traps make you feel cornered, forcing a decision that serves them either way. But when you add your own options, you step outside their frame entirely. You take back control not by resisting, but by rewriting the game. Adding your own option is an act of mental liberation. Instead of accepting the choices handed to you, you create a third path that aligns with your truth. You say, "Actually, I'd rather handle it differently," or "Another way might work better." That single sentence destroys the illusion of inevitability. The manipulator's power vanishes because their influence depends on you believing that no other way exists. Psychologically, creating options activates critical thinking and restores autonomy. It moves you from emotional reaction to strategic decision-making. It's how you remind yourself and them that control over your choices always belongs to you. Manipulators hate this because it breaks their illusion of dominance. Every time you add your own option, you prove you're not trapped. You're choosing. It's subtle, calm, and devastatingly effective because the moment you realize you can always create a new door, no one can ever corner you again. Set clear deadlines. Vagueness is the manipulator's playground. They promise results soon, offer favors later, and expect you to wait indefinitely, keeping you trapped in uncertainty they control. But when you set clear deadlines, you drag their ambiguity into the light. You turn someday into a specific date, and that precision is lethal to deceit. It forces accountability where there was once only delay and excuses. When you calmly say, "Let's set a deadline for this," you're not being demanding, you're creating structure. Manipulators thrive in the gray areas, where expectations are unclear and responsibility can shift. A firm timeline corners them into reality. They can no longer hide behind promises or emotional distractions. The moment a deadline exists, the truth of their intent becomes visible. Either they deliver or they don't. Psychologically, clear deadlines protect your mental energy. They end the endless waiting that feeds anxiety and self-doubt. Your brain relaxes when there's structure because uncertainty is where manipulation grows. Timelines transform emotional fog into measurable progress. Those who act in good faith welcome deadlines. They see them as collaboration. Manipulators resist them because clarity kills control. When you set the terms of time, you silently declare that you won't live in their uncertainty. Each clear boundary on when becomes a declaration of power over if, and that's how you turn manipulation's favorite weapon, delay, into your greatest defense. Definition. Decline public negotiations. Manipulators love an audience. In public, they gain power not through logic, but through performance, tone, image, and the pressure of social expectation. When you refuse to negotiate publicly and say, "Let's discuss this privately," you take away their stage. You strip them of the crowd's influence, their ability to shame, charm, or corner you under the watchful eyes of others. Manipulators depend on the fear of embarrassment to make you agree, but in private, that weapon disappears. Public negotiations create invisible traps. The presence of others makes you feel obligated to appear agreeable, reasonable, or kind, even at your own expense. Manipulators exploit this instinct masterfully. They frame your hesitation as weakness, your boundaries as coldness, and your refusal as rudeness. By pulling the conversation into private space, you take back psychological control. You shift from emotional exposure to strategic clarity. Psychologically, privacy restores autonomy. Away from the audience, your brain no longer feels the pull of social conformity. You can think instead of perform. The manipulator loses their script because their tactics, public guilt, peer pressure, emotional theatrics cannot survive in silence. Declining public negotiation isn't avoidance, it's strength. It says, "I don't argue for approval, I decide for truth." You refuse to play the social game of appearances, and in doing so, you move from being the subject of manipulation to being the one who sets the terms. Request full numbers. Numbers don't lie, but people using them often do. Manipulators love half-truths disguised as data. We're seeing huge growth. Almost everyone agrees. It's just a small cost. These vague claims sound convincing because they wear the mask of logic. But when you calmly request full numbers, the illusion shatters. You shift the conversation from emotional persuasion to measurable reality, and that's where manipulators lose their grip. Asking for the whole picture, percentages, totals, time frames, comparisons, forces transparency. Huge growth becomes 12% over 6 months. Everyone becomes 3 people. The truth often shrinks when exposed to specifics. That's the beauty of numbers. They bring clarity, and clarity kills deception. Psychologically, this habit strengthens your analytical mindset and weakens emotional manipulation. Your brain switches from reacting to verifying, from trusting tone to testing facts. You stop letting enthusiasm or fear dictate your judgment. Each question, how many, compared to what, Over what period is a shield that turns charm into data and data into truth. Manipulators dread quantification because it traps them in reality. Real professionals, honest leaders, and transparent people never fear being measured, but liars do. They hide behind adjectives, not evidence. When you insist on seeing the numbers, you're not being difficult, you're being disciplined. In a world of exaggerated claims and selective facts, asking for the full data isn't skepticism, it's self-defense wrapped in logic. Notice tone shifts. Words can lie, but tone rarely does. Manipulators reveal themselves not in what they say, but how they say it. When you learn to notice tone shifts, the sudden change in rhythm, warmth, or intensity, you begin to hear the truth beneath the conversation. A voice that turns overly sweet after resistance, a calm tone that suddenly sharpens when you assert yourself, or a joking tone that hides a sting. All are signals of emotional strategy, not sincerity. Tone shifts are micro-tells. They expose discomfort, deceit, and hidden agendas faster than logic ever could. Psychologically, tone is tied to emotion. It leaks what the manipulator is trying to conceal. When you pick up on that flicker, a slight pause, a forced laugh, a strain in their voice, you're witnessing the mask slip for a second. Most people ignore it because they want to believe the words, but you can train your mind to trust your ears more than your hopes. Recognizing tone changes also protects your emotional balance. Instead of reacting to the surface message, you read the energy behind it. You stay anchored while others unconsciously reveal their intent. Manipulators hate silence and awareness. They thrive on your distraction. But once you hear the tension behind their charm, the coldness behind their concern, you can't unhear it. To notice tone shifts is to see between the lines, to hear manipulation unravel in real time. It's intuition sharpened into armor, proof that truth doesn't always come in words. It comes in the tremble between them. Say, "I'm not comfortable." Few phrases disarm manipulation as powerfully as, "I'm not comfortable." It's calm, personal, and impossible to argue with. Manipulators expect you to justify your boundaries, to explain or defend your no, but this phrase denies them that opening. It shifts the focus from debate to self-awareness. You're not attacking, accusing, or explaining. You're simply stating a truth about how you feel. And truth, delivered quietly, is something even the most skilled manipulator can't easily twist. When you say, "I'm not comfortable," you're doing more than expressing emotion. You're setting a line without aggression. It creates an invisible wall of respect. The manipulator can push, question, or charm, but this phrase stands still. It leaves no weak points for guilt or persuasion to slip through. Psychologically, it's a grounding tool. It anchors you in self-trust and signals to your brain that your discomfort is valid and worth protecting. It stops the spiral of overthinking, of wondering whether you're overreacting or being rude, and replaces it with certainty. Discomfort is a signal, not an apology. Most importantly, this phrase humanizes boundaries. It's not defensive or cold, it's honest. It invites empathy from those who respect you and unease in those who don't. And that's its hidden power. "I'm not comfortable" instantly reveals intentions. Genuine people will adjust. Manipulators will push harder. And in that difference, you'll see exactly who you're dealing with. Check references. Trust is the manipulator's favorite shortcut. They count on your goodwill, your instinct to believe, your desire to see the best in people. But when you say, "I'd like to check your references," you slam that shortcut shut. Suddenly, the dynamic shifts from blind trust to verified truth. Manipulators hate verification because it exposes what they work hardest to hide: inconsistency. Honest people welcome transparency. Deceivers call it mistrust. That difference reveals everything. Checking references isn't just about employment. It's about life. It's asking for background before investment, history before loyalty, proof before faith. Whether it's a new partner, colleague, or business deal, Looking into past patterns is looking into future outcomes. Manipulators live on borrowed credibility, often wrapping themselves in charm or authority to mask a trail of broken promises. Asking about their past is like turning on the lights in a room they preferred stayed dark. Psychologically, verification anchors you in reality. It protects you from emotional manipulation, the illusion of connection that blinds judgment. It also signals self-respect. You trust, but you verify. You care, but you confirm. It tells others that your trust is valuable and must be earned, not assumed. Checking references is not cynicism, it's wisdom. Those with nothing to hide will respect your diligence. Those who protest reveal their motives. Truth doesn't fear being checked, lies do. And that's why the simple act of verifying someone's story can save you from becoming part of it. Cite your personal policy. Boundaries are powerful, but boundaries backed by policy are untouchable. When you say, "It's my policy not to lend money," or "I don't make decisions on the spot," you shift the focus away from emotion and onto principle. Manipulators can argue with feelings, but they can't argue with structure. By citing a personal policy, you turn your boundary from a personal whim into a rule carved in stone, and that makes it unbreakable. Manipulators thrive on negotiation. They look for emotional weak spots, guilt, fear, people-pleasing. But a stated policy removes that leverage. It's no longer you saying no, it's the system you follow. It sounds professional, grounded, and non-negotiable. Even subtle phrases like, "I have a rule about not discussing private matters at work," or "I don't commit without reviewing details in writing," create invisible walls that protect your peace. Psychologically, this tactic gives your brain permission to hold the line without guilt. It replaces hesitation with consistency. The more you repeat your policy, the more your subconscious believes in it, and the easier it becomes to enforce. People respect what sounds official. It commands authority without aggression. Manipulators hate rules they didn't create. They'll mock them, challenge them, or call you rigid. But that's proof they can't penetrate your boundary. A personal policy turns no into something clean, calm, and final. It's not a rejection, it's governance. And governance doesn't argue. Cross-check info. Manipulation feeds on your first impression. The fastest way to starve it is to cross-check information before you believe, share, or act. A single source, no matter how confident, authoritative, or emotional, can be a trap. Triangulate. Compare claims across independent sources, original documents, and people with no stake in the outcome. When stories align without sharing a script, truth gets louder. When details shift or shrink under scrutiny, deception shows its seams. Psychologically, cross-checking yanks you out of the emotional current and into verification mode. It slows your pulse, quiets the urgency, and turns you from target to examiner. Ask for the origin, not the echo. Hunt timestamps. Verify quotes word for word. Notice what's missing. Context, counterexamples, inconvenient data. Manipulators rely on cherry-picked facts, bright enough to dazzle, narrow enough to mislead. When you widen the lens, their narrative fractures. Cross-check people too. If someone makes a claim about policy, ask to see the policy. If they cite everyone, ask for names. If a promise is made, confirm it in writing and with a second witness. Archive emails, screenshot posts, keep receipts, not to be paranoid, but to be precise. The moment you make verification a habit, pressure tactics lose their grip. Urgency fades, authority shrinks to size. You stop being steered by the loudest voice in the room and start listening to the quiet consistency of reality. Cross-checking doesn't make you slow, it makes you unshakable. Test small before big. Trust should be earned, not assumed, and manipulators hate that truth. They want immediate confidence, blind faith, and full access before proving anything. But when you test small before big, you take away their fastest route to control. You give them limited opportunities to show their true colors, and in those small tests, the truth always leaks through. A manipulator can fake honesty for a day, but not for a pattern. Start with something minor, a promise, a task, a commitment, and observe. Do they follow through? Do their words match their actions? The way someone handles the small things reveals everything about how they'll handle the big ones. Manipulators rely on charm, not consistency, but small tests force them into a realm they can't perform in: accountability. Psychologically, this approach protects your emotional investment. It rewires your instinct to trust quickly into one that watches quietly. You no longer bet your piece on someone's potential. You wait for their proof. This habit builds emotional intelligence and shields you from disappointment disguised as connection. Testing small isn't about distrust. It's about discernment. The people who are genuine won't mind proving themselves in small ways. Manipulators will take offense, accuse you of doubting them, or disappear altogether. And that's your answer, because in truth, you don't need to test people with words. Just give them time and small responsibility. Those who are real will rise. Those who aren't will reveal. Decline obligation gifts. Some gifts are not generosity. They're currency. Manipulators give not to bless, but to bind. Their gifts often come wrapped in invisible strings, meant to create a debt you never agreed to owe. When you accept these kind gestures, you unknowingly step into a psychological contract. Now you owe them. But when you calmly say, "I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept this," you break that spell before it takes hold. Manipulative gift-giving is a silent trap. It's how people manufacture loyalty, guilt, and compliance without ever asking outright. "After everything I've done for you," becomes their favorite weapon later. By declining such gifts, you refuse to be bought emotionally. You protect your independence, your boundaries, and your ability to make decisions free from obligation. Psychologically, gifts trigger the rule of reciprocity, a deep human drive to return favors. Manipulators exploit this instinct to steer your behavior, but awareness dismantles the trap. You can recognize when a gesture feels heavy, conditional, or performative. You sense when a gift is really leverage. Refusing an obligation gift isn't rude, it's self-respect. True generosity seeks no return. Manipulation always does. When you learn to tell the difference, you stop confusing control for kindness. You stop carrying debts that were never yours to begin with. And in that quiet refusal, you reclaim the one thing no manipulator can give or take: your freedom. Suggest mediators. Manipulators thrive in private, where they can twist words, control tone, and rewrite reality without witnesses. The moment you suggest a mediator, you drag their tactics into the light, and they burn under it. Whether it's a neutral colleague, a friend, or a professional third party, introducing another person into the dynamic destroys the manipulator's greatest weapon: isolation. It's not confrontation, it's exposure. When you say, "Let's bring someone else in to help clarify," you're not asking for backup, you're demanding balance. Manipulators hate this because mediators record, witness, and question. They take away the manipulator's ability to frame you as overreacting or misunderstanding. Suddenly, every word must hold up under observation, and that makes deceit almost impossible to sustain. Psychologically, the presence of a mediator stabilizes your nervous system. It creates safety where manipulation once created chaos. You no longer have to defend your version of events alone. The truth gets shared space. It also triggers accountability. The manipulator must now explain their actions to someone who isn't under their control. Expect resistance. They'll insist, "We don't need anyone else involved," or guilt you with, "I thought you trusted me." That's your confirmation you're doing the right thing. Honest people welcome transparency. Only deceivers fear witnesses. Suggesting mediation doesn't just protect you, it changes the environment from emotional warfare to structured dialogue. And in that clarity, their power quietly collapses. Keep clear limits. Boundaries are invisible armor. When you keep clear limits, you define where your energy ends and another person's influence begins. Manipulators hate this because boundaries make you untouchable. They can't guilt, flatter, or pressure their way through clarity. The moment you know what's off limits, you stop being an easy target. I don't discuss that. That's not something I'm available for. I can't take that on. Each line you draw reclaims a piece of your peace. Psychologically, clear limits anchor identity. Without them, you dissolve into other people's expectations, saying yes when you mean no, helping when you're drained, apologizing for existing. Manipulators thrive in that fog. They test your edges constantly, inching closer until you forget where you stand. But when your boundaries are defined, consistent, and calmly enforced, they run into a wall made of self-respect. Limits aren't cruelty, they're structure. They tell others how to treat you and remind you how to treat yourself. Every time you enforce one, you send a signal to your mind, your body, and the world that your well-being is not negotiable. Keeping clear limits transforms you from reactive to resolute. You stop explaining, overgiving, or seeking permission. You operate from quiet certainty, because the truth is, boundaries don't push people away. They filter out those who never intended to meet you with respect in the first place. Spot projection tactics. Projection is the manipulator's favorite mirror trick. It's when they accuse you of the very things they're doing, lying, being selfish, overreacting, so that you start defending yourself instead of seeing them clearly. It's psychological smoke and mirrors. They throw their own flaws at you to hide from accountability. The moment you learn to spot projection, their illusion collapses. You stop absorbing blame that doesn't belong to you. A manipulator's goal is to flip the script. If they're being dishonest, they'll call you untrustworthy. If they're controlling, they'll say you're the one trying to dominate. They project because deep down, they know what they're doing, and accusing you first keeps them safe from exposure. It's emotional misdirection, designed to make you doubt your own integrity while they protect theirs. Psychologically, projection works only when you react. The instant you defend yourself, you've stepped into their narrative. But when you pause, observe, and think, this isn't about me, you take back control. Their words reveal more about them than about you. That's the paradox. They confess through accusation. Spotting projection requires emotional detachment and quiet observation. Instead of arguing, reflect. Who benefits from this blame? Who actually matches this behavior? Once you recognize the pattern, you become untouchable. Their accusations lose their sting because you see the truth behind them. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who won't play the part they've written for them. Don't promise under stress. Pressure clouds judgment, and manipulators know it. They push you to agree when your heart races, your mind spins, and your emotions drown out reason. Just say yes. We'll figure it out later. I need an answer now. Those moments are not about urgency. They're about control. When you make promises under stress, you're not deciding, you're surviving. And manipulators exploit that split-second vulnerability to trap you in commitments you never truly chose. Saying, I can't make a promise right now, is not hesitation, it's power. It tells them you refuse to let adrenaline make your decisions. Stress hijacks the brain's logic centers, turning thoughtful people into impulsive ones. That's why manipulators create chaos. So, you'll grasp for stability, even if it means agreeing to something you'll later regret. By pausing, you break their spell. You remind yourself that calm must precede commitment. Psychologically, the mind under pressure seeks relief, not clarity. It wants the discomfort to stop, and promising seems like an escape, but that relief comes with chains. Waiting until you're calm gives your rational mind time to return, to weigh truth against emotion. Real strength isn't in saying yes, it's in knowing when to wait. Those who can hold silence in chaos, who refuse to decide from fear, become immovable. Manipulators hate that composure because it makes you untouchable. A promise made in peace is choice. A promise made in stress is surrender. Choose peace. Use decision checklists. Manipulators exploit chaos. They want you overwhelmed, emotional, and impulsive, because a rushed mind is an easy mind to control. But when you use decision checklists, you transform every choice from a reaction into a process. A checklist is your anchor. It slows time, restores logic, and pulls you out of their emotional current. It reminds you that not every decision deserves urgency, and not every feeling equals truth. When you write out a few grounded questions, what are the facts? Who benefits most? What are the risks? You create a filter between their influence and your judgment. The act of checking each box forces your brain into analytical mode, cooling the emotional heat that manipulation depends on. Every question becomes a gatekeeper, stopping impulsive yes answers before they escape your mouth. Psychologically, decision checklists rewire your cognitive flow. They activate your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles reasoning and foresight, while quieting the amygdala, the emotional alarm manipulators love to trigger. You stop chasing peace through compliance and start creating peace through clarity. Manipulators hate structure because structure makes deception measurable. They thrive on spontaneity, ambiguity, and guilt. But when every decision must pass through your checklist, their chaos loses access to you. A list might look simple, but in your hands, it's a shield, a written reminder that logic always outranks pressure. Ask, what if we do nothing? Manipulators thrive on urgency. They push you to act fast, to fix something immediately, to make a decision before you've even had time to think. But when you calmly ask, what if we do nothing? You detonate their illusion of necessity. That single question forces silence, reflection, and reality to return to the room. It challenges the hidden assumption that action is always better than patience. Psychologically, this question shifts your brain from emotional reactivity to analytical distance. Manipulators build their power on false stakes. They inflate consequences, exaggerate risks, and create artificial panic. By asking what happens if nothing changes, you test whether the problem is real or manufactured. More often than not, the world doesn't collapse. The pressure was never truth. It was theater. This question also exposes motive. If someone grows defensive, angry, or evasive when you ask it, it's a red flag. They needed your urgency to maintain control. Honest people, however, will consider it with you, exploring the realistic outcomes. What if we do nothing? Is calm rebellion. It's how you reclaim time and logic from manipulation. It invites perspective, revealing that stillness itself can be power. Because often, when you resist the push to react, you uncover the truth. The crisis was never about what needed to be done. It was about who needed you to move. Declare expectations up front. Manipulators thrive in the shadows of uncertainty. They depend on unspoken assumptions, blurry boundaries, and the comfort of you figuring it out later. But when you declare your expectations up front, you flip the dynamic completely. You remove the gray areas where manipulation hides and replace them with clarity, a light that exposes intent before deception can take root. Saying what you expect early isn't arrogance, it's protection. Here's what I need, here's what I'm okay with, or this is how I work best, are not demands. They're declarations of self-respect. Manipulators rely on surprise. They love to say, I didn't know that's what you wanted. But when your standards are clear from the beginning, they lose that excuse. You've eliminated the loophole that fuels their control. Psychologically, setting expectations up front gives your mind peace. It prevents resentment, self-doubt, and the slow erosion of confidence that comes from being misunderstood. Clarity creates safety for you and for any honest person involved. Those who respect you will appreciate your transparency. Those who plan to exploit you will feel cornered by it. The moment you speak your expectations, you create structure. Structure demands integrity. and integrity terrifies those who operate through chaos. So speak your truth early, calmly, and unapologetically. It's not confrontation, it's clarity. Because once your expectations are on the table, anyone who stays knows exactly what line they cannot cross. Pause when flattered. Flattery is the oldest doorway into your defenses. Manipulators use it like sugar, sweet enough to lower your guard, addictive enough to make you crave more. You're the only one I trust. No one does it as well as you. Those words feel good, almost intoxicating, and that's the danger. When you rush to respond to praise, you unconsciously start performing to keep it. But when you pause instead of basking, you regain control. You remind yourself that validation is not currency, it's bait. Flattery works because it touches the deepest human need, to feel seen, appreciated, special. But manipulators weaponize that need. They study your ego like a map, discovering which compliments open, which locks. By pausing, even for a few seconds, you interrupt the trance. You give your logic time to wake up and ask, why this praise and why now? That single question can reveal the manipulation hiding behind the smile. Psychologically, the pause disrupts emotional conditioning. It stops the brain from linking approval with compliance. Instead of responding with automatic gratitude, or worse, obligation, you stay neutral, grounded, unpredictable. True confidence doesn't chase praise, it observes it. When you pause after flattery, you don't reject kindness. You evaluate intent. You force sincerity to prove itself. And in that stillness, the mask often slips. Because genuine admiration doesn't demand a favor, but manipulation always follows a compliment with a hook. The pause is how you catch it before it catches you. Separate accounts. Control often begins where boundaries blur. Manipulators, whether financial, emotional, or professional, love shared access. It's their backdoor into your freedom. When you separate accounts, you reclaim autonomy in its purest form. Money, passwords, documents, even digital profiles. Each separation builds a wall between your independence and someone else's influence. It's not mistrust, it's self-protection. Because the moment someone controls your access, they control you. Financial manipulators, for instance, thrive on dependency. They mix resources until you can't tell what's yours and what's theirs. Suddenly, you're asking permission to use your own money, to make your own choices. But separate accounts say, I decide, I manage, I own. It's a quiet declaration of self-worth disguised as organization. Psychologically, independence signals safety to your brain. It removes the fear of being trapped or punished for non-compliance. It restores a sense of agency, of knowing that your survival, your privacy, your stability aren't contingent on anyone's goodwill. Every password you protect and every resource you keep separate tells your subconscious, I am secure because I have control. Manipulators will call this distrustful or cold. They'll twist boundaries into betrayal because shared access is how they maintain power. But you owe no one your vulnerability. Separation isn't distance, it's definition. It's the difference between being supported and being owned. Protecting your access protects your peace, and peace is something no one else should ever hold the keys to. Confirm any term changes. Manipulators thrive in the gray areas where details shift quietly and agreements evolve without acknowledgement. That's why you must confirm any term changes the moment they appear. Whether it's a deal, a promise, or a simple plan, if the conditions suddenly adjust, pause and restate them out loud or in writing. Just to confirm, you're saying the deadline is now next week instead of tomorrow, correct? That one sentence burns away the fog they depend on. Psychologically, confirmation forces accountability. Manipulators use subtle edits, changing timelines, expectations, or responsibilities to gain advantage while making you feel crazy for noticing. But when you clearly document every alteration, they lose their most powerful weapon, plausible deniability. You're no longer vulnerable to, "You must have misunderstood," or "That's not what I said." The facts stand solid and visible. Each confirmation also reinforces your control over boundaries. You're not arguing, you're clarifying. You're saying, "I'm aware, I'm tracking, and I won't be quietly rewritten." The manipulator's discomfort when you seek clarity is proof you've hit the nerve of their tactic. Confirming changes doesn't signal mistrust, it signals intelligence. It tells others that your agreements live in reality, not emotion, because truth can handle being written down, but deception needs things to stay fluid. Every time you confirm a change, you anchor yourself in truth and leave manipulation gasping for air. Summarize calls and email. Manipulators love spoken words. They vanish into air, impossible to prove or pin down. That's why one of the most powerful habits you can build is to summarize calls in an email immediately afterward. It's quiet armor. You write, "Just to recap our call, here's what we agreed on. Details. Please confirm if this matches your understanding." That simple message transforms a fleeting conversation into written truth. Suddenly, there's no room for, "I never said that," or "You misunderstood." Psychologically, this practice protects you from gaslighting and revisionism. Manipulators depend on your memory being emotional, not factual. They twist timelines, blur commitments, and weaponize ambiguity. But written summaries pin their words to the wall. They can't rewrite history once it's time-stamped. It's not confrontation, it's preservation. This also signals professionalism and composure. It tells others that you operate with structure and accountability, not emotion or assumption. It subtly teaches people that communication with you leaves a record, discouraging deception before it starts. Each email becomes both shield and mirror. It reflects honesty while deterring manipulation. Even if the other person never replies, the silence itself becomes evidence, because truth thrives in documentation and lies suffocate when forced to live in daylight. Writing that one recap isn't busy work. It's psychological insurance that your reality stays yours. Ask trusted people. Manipulators isolate you first. They make you doubt your judgment, your instincts, and eventually your support system. Their control thrives in secrecy, in the belief that no one else would understand. But the moment you ask trusted people for their perspective, their influence begins to dissolve. A manipulator's power lives in your silence. Truth lives in shared light. When you reach out and say, "Does this seem right to you?" or "Am I overreacting?" you break the mental cage they've built around you. Outside voices bring objectivity, something manipulation can't survive. Honest friends, mentors, or loved ones can see what you can't because they aren't entangled in the emotional web. They recognize patterns, tone shifts, and inconsistencies you've normalized under pressure. Their clarity becomes your anchor. Psychologically, asking trusted people restores your internal compass. It reminds your nervous system that you're not alone, that your perceptions matter, and that second opinions are signs of strength, not weakness. The manipulator wants you isolated and self-doubting. Truth wants you connected and grounded. Those who care about you will never make you feel foolish for seeking advice. They'll make you feel safe for doing it. Manipulators, on the other hand, will panic, guilt you, or label you disloyal for confiding in others. That reaction tells you everything. Asking trusted people is not just about advice. It's about truth-checking your reality. And when you have witnesses to your truth, no one can rewrite it again. Keep your goals visible. Manipulators win when you forget what you're fighting for. They distract, confuse, and emotionally exhaust you until you lose sight of your original purpose. When your goals fade from view, you become easier to steer, easier to guilt, easier to use. But when you keep your goals visible, written down, clear, and alive in front of you, you anchor yourself in truth. Every attempt to sway you must first pass through the filter of, "Does this serve my goal?" And that single question can save you from years of detours. A manipulator's greatest tool is misdirection. They'll make their needs sound like yours, their urgency feel like your duty. But when your priorities are visible, you can spot the mismatch instantly. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. Your goals become your compass. They remind you what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Psychologically, visible goals strengthen self-control. They keep your prefrontal cortex, your rational mind, in charge, even when emotions try to hijack your judgment. A written goal is a mirror that reflects manipulation back as noise. It shows you where distraction ends and intention begins. Keeping your goals visible isn't just about ambition, it's self-defense. It's a daily act of remembrance that your time and focus are sacred. The clearer your direction, the harder it is for anyone to redirect you. Manipulators can only move those who've forgotten where they're going. When your purpose stays in sight, persuasion loses its power. Reset price anchors. Manipulators are masters of framing value. They set anchors, artificial reference points, to make you feel like you're getting a deal, when in reality, you're being guided into overpaying or overgiving. It happens everywhere. Normally, this costs $500, but for you, it's $300. Suddenly, $300 feels like a bargain, even if the real value is $150. Anchors distort perception by planting false comparisons in your mind. To stay unmanipulated, you must learn to reset the anchor. When you pause and question the reference point, says who, compared to what, you break the illusion. You shift your focus from their frame to reality's frame. Resetting the anchor means reestablishing your own baseline for value, time, and worth. It's reclaiming the right to define what something means to you, not what they want you to believe. Psychologically, price anchoring plays on cognitive bias, the brain's tendency to rely on the first number it sees as a mental benchmark. Manipulators weaponize this by flooding you with inflated figures or exaggerated sacrifices. But once you question the premise, the spell breaks. The brain recalibrates, emotion fades, and reason returns. Resetting anchors isn't just about money, it's about power. It's noticing when someone tries to dictate what's reasonable or fair before you've even thought about it yourself. The next time you hear a number, a favor, or a promise that feels loaded, pause and set your own standard. Anchors only hold if you stay tied to them. Summarize calls and email. Manipulators love spoken words. They vanish into air, impossible to prove or pin down. That's why one of the most powerful habits you can build is to summarize calls in an email immediately afterward. It's quiet armor. You write, "Just to recap our call, here's what we agreed on. Details. Please confirm if this matches your understanding." That simple message transforms a fleeting conversation into written truth. Suddenly, there's no room for, "I never said that," or "you misunderstood." Psychologically, this practice protects you from gaslighting and revisionism. Manipulators depend on your memory being emotional, not factual. They twist timelines, blur commitments, and weaponize ambiguity. But written summaries pin their words to the wall. They can't rewrite history once it's timestamped. It's not confrontation, it's preservation. This also signals professionalism and composure. It tells others that you operate with structure and accountability, not emotion or assumption. It subtly teaches people that communication with you leaves a record, discouraging deception before it starts. Each email becomes both shield and mirror. It reflects honesty while deterring manipulation. Even if the other person never replies, the silence itself becomes evidence, because truth thrives in documentation and lies suffocate when forced to live in daylight. Writing that one recap isn't busy work. It's psychological insurance that your reality stays yours. Use only if conditions. Power shifts the moment you stop agreeing unconditionally. When you begin to use only if statements, you reclaim control of every agreement. Manipulators depend on automatic compliance. They count on your eagerness to please or your fear of conflict. But when you say, I can help only if we set a clear deadline, or I'll agree only if the terms are written down, you turn every decision into a negotiation instead of a surrender. Psychologically, this phrase rewires the balance of power. It replaces emotional reaction with strategic logic. Only if sets boundaries without saying no outright. It forces reciprocity. You're not rejecting. You're defining the conditions that protect your time, energy, and dignity. This subtle shift unnerves manipulators because they thrive on vague promises and guilt-based compliance. Conditions demand clarity, and clarity kills manipulation. When you use only if, you also activate self-respect. It reminds you that your help, your agreement, your yes has value. You stop being a resource to exploit and become a partner to respect. This isn't resistance, it's refinement. It teaches people that your cooperation has standards. Each conditional agreement you make strengthens your psychological footing. You're not reactive, you're deliberate, you're not withholding, you're wise. Because real power doesn't come from saying yes. It comes from saying yes, only if. Involve others in risks. Manipulators love privacy when it benefits them. They'll tell you, let's keep this between us, or insist that secrecy shows trust. But that isolation is their breeding ground for control. When you involve others in risks, you drag the situation into the light, and light is the one thing manipulation cannot survive. By sharing responsibility, you remove the manipulator's ability to twist facts, shift blame, or trap you in guilt later. When something feels uncertain, dangerous, or too good to be true, pause and bring others in. Ask for witnesses, partners, or second eyes. Say, let's loop someone else in before moving forward. It sounds cooperative, but it's strategic. It changes the entire power dynamic. Now, the manipulator isn't dealing with one target, but a group, a system, a mirror too wide for their distortion to fill. Psychologically, involving others protects your emotional balance. It replaces isolation with accountability, secrecy with structure. It activates rational thinking because collaboration forces transparency. You're no longer navigating the manipulator's reality alone. You have external perspective, and that makes their tactics visible. Genuine people welcome shared responsibility. Manipulators panic under it. They'll protest, deflect, or claim you're overcomplicating things. That's how you know you're doing the right thing. When you bring others into risky decisions, you're not spreading fear, you're spreading truth. You turn manipulation's strongest weapon, privacy, into its undoing. Call out guilt tripping. Guilt is a manipulator's favorite leash. They tug on your empathy until you confuse compassion with obligation. After all I've done for you, you're really going to let me down like that? These words are emotional shackles, crafted to make you feel responsible for someone else's discomfort. But when you calmly say, that sounds like guilt, not fairness, you snap the leash in half. You expose the tactic, and once it's named, it loses its power. Manipulators use guilt because it works fast. It bypasses logic and attacks your identity. They want you to prove you're good, loyal, kind, or selfless by surrendering your boundaries. But calling it out interrupts the emotional current. It forces accountability. Suddenly, they can't hide behind victimhood or moral superiority. They must face the fact that they're trying to control through emotion. Psychologically, guilt tripping thrives in silence. As long as you internalize the shame, they win. But when you verbalize it, when you shine light on it, you return the burden to its rightful owner. You make it clear that your empathy isn't a weapon they can turn against you. Saying, I won't be made to feel guilty for having boundaries, is not cruelty, it's clarity. It separates love from submission, care from compliance. Manipulators fear that sentence because it ends their game instantly. The moment you call out guilt tripping, the guilt stops belonging to you and starts revealing them. Check Big choices later. Manipulators crave immediacy. They want your yes right now before logic catches up. Urgency is their favorite spell because it bypasses reflection. But when you check big choices later, you shatter that magic. You give your mind the time it needs to cool, analyze, and return to balance. It's not hesitation, it's intelligence. A rushed decision belongs to the manipulator. A delayed one belongs to you. When emotions run high, fear, excitement, guilt, flattery, your brain releases chemicals that blur judgment. That's when manipulators strike, offering once-in-a-lifetime deals or guilt-ridden ultimatums. By stepping back, sleeping on it, rereading the terms, or seeking outside perspective, you strip their power away. Overnight, emotional noise fades, and red flags grow loud. What felt persuasive yesterday looks poisonous in daylight. Psychologically, waiting activates your rational brain and quiets the emotional centers that drive impulsive behavior. It's like letting muddy water settle. You finally see what's really beneath the surface. Time doesn't weaken good offers, it only exposes the bad ones. Manipulators will hate your patience. They'll say, "You're overthinking," or "You'll lose your chance." That's how you know you're doing it right. Real opportunities withstand scrutiny. False ones demand urgency. When you give your choices time, you protect your future from your own adrenaline, because anything that can't survive a night of reflection isn't worth your tomorrow. Trust patterns, not excuses. Manipulators live in apology and promise. They trade in words, not change. They'll say they didn't mean it, that it was stress, that this time will be different. And maybe once you believe them. But truth doesn't hide in explanations. It reveals itself in repetition. When you trust patterns, not excuses, you stop falling for performances and start reading behavior as data. What people do repeatedly is who they are, no matter how beautifully they explain it away. Psychologically, this mindset rewires your emotional radar. It shifts you from empathy to discernment. Excuses play on your compassion. They make you question your judgment, forgive too fast, and hope too long. But patterns are objective. They don't need your interpretation. When someone continually disrespects your boundaries, breaks promises, or twists reality, the pattern is the message. Their consistency in harm speaks louder than their creativity in apology. Recognizing patterns protects your peace. It means you no longer wait for someone's potential to appear. You respond to their proven behavior. It's how you escape the manipulation loop of guilt, hope, and disappointment. Manipulators will call you cold for noticing. In truth, you're clear. To trust patterns is to finally believe what your intuition has been whispering all along. Words can disguise intent, but actions always confess it. When you stop chasing explanations and start tracking evidence, you no longer need closure. You already have the truth. Spot when favors become leverage. Manipulators rarely start with demands. They start with favors. A small gesture, a helping hand, a gift that seems thoughtful but carries invisible strings. At first, it feels generous. It disarms you. But over time, that kindness transforms into currency, and the manipulator begins to collect. When someone's favor starts to feel like a debt, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a transaction. The shift is subtle. They'll remind you what they've done. "After everything I've helped you with," or "You owe me this one." What was once a gift becomes a weapon of guilt. They use it to make you comply, to silence your boundaries, to keep you emotionally obligated. The moment you sense hesitation to say no because of something they did for you, you're feeling the weight of manipulation disguised as generosity. Psychologically, this tactic preys on your empathy and sense of fairness. Good people want to reciprocate kindness, but manipulators exploit that instinct until it becomes control. The key is awareness. Genuine generosity expects nothing in return, while emotional debt demands it. You protect yourself by separating gratitude from obligation. Say thank you sincerely, but don't trade autonomy for it. A true favor ends where appreciation begins. A manipulative one lingers, waiting to collect. Once you can spot when kindness turns into leverage, you'll never again mistake control for care. Revisit old promises. Manipulators thrive in forgotten agreements. They count on time and emotion to blur memory, on you being too polite, too busy, or too trusting to revisit what was once said. But when you calmly bring up the past and say, let's go back to what we agreed on, the illusion collapses. Old promises are the trail of truth they hoped you'd never follow. Revisiting them forces accountability, and accountability is the one language manipulators can't fake. They'll often change their story to suit the present, claiming you misunderstood or that things evolved. But memory is power, and documentation is armor. When you recall details, dates, or written exchanges, you pin their words to the wall of time, unmovable, undeniable. Manipulators fear that kind of precision because it robs them of their favorite tool, rewriting history. Psychologically, revisiting promises reestablishes balance. It reminds your brain that fairness is not confrontation, it's clarity. You're not arguing, you're anchoring truth. It also reinforces your self-respect, telling your subconscious that your expectations matter, that your trust deserves consistency. Manipulators want your memory short and your forgiveness long. But when you revisit what was said, you reclaim both the timeline and the truth. Because in a world of shifting stories, the person who remembers doesn't just hold the past, they control the narrative. Ask, what's the rush? The moment you ask, what's the rush? You throw a wrench into the manipulator's engine. Pressure is their favorite tool, compressing time, limiting options, making you feel that hesitation equals loss. But this simple question exposes the illusion of urgency. It forces them to explain why speed matters, and in doing so, you reveal what they're hiding. True opportunities withstand patience. False ones collapse under scrutiny. When someone insists you act now, they're not empowering you, they're steering you. Manipulators weaponize momentum, knowing that urgency shuts down reason and activates emotion. But when you pause and ask, why the rush? You pull yourself out of their timeline and back into your own. That single question flips the dynamic. They must justify their urgency while you regain your calm. Psychologically, it buys you oxygen. It re-engages your logical brain, slows your heart rate, and reclaims your focus. It reminds your subconscious that you are not being hunted. You are choosing. Time pressure is one of the oldest psychological tricks, and the antidote is awareness. You'll notice their reaction tells you everything. Honest people explain, manipulators deflect, guilt, or insist. Either way, you've exposed their strategy. Asking, what's the rush? Isn't suspicion, it's sovereignty. It's the sound of someone who refuses to be stampeded, because the person who controls the pace controls the power. Track who interrupts most. Interruptions are microaggressions disguised as conversation. They reveal dominance, disregard, and subtle control. When you track who interrupts most, you begin to see the invisible hierarchy. People try to build over you. Manipulators interrupt to steer the narrative, to cut off your clarity, to make you feel smaller without ever saying it outright. Each time they talk over you, they're sending a message. My voice matters more than yours. Start noticing the pattern, not just who interrupts, but when. Do they cut you off when you're confident? When you're about to make a valid point? When the truth starts surfacing? The timing exposes intent. Someone who interrupts to clarify is human. Someone who interrupts to dominate is strategic. Awareness turns those moments from frustration into data. Psychologically, tracking interruptions gives you insight into power dynamics. It trains your subconscious to recognize disrespect early. You stop internalizing it as, I wasn't clear enough, and start seeing it as, they couldn't handle listening. Manipulators hate being observed because their control depends on subtlety. When you mentally record their interruptions, or even calmly call it out, "I wasn't finished yet." You break their rhythm of dominance. Each time you track and name the pattern, your self-worth strengthens. You teach others that your voice holds weight, that your space in the conversation is not negotiable, because people who respect you wait to hear you finish, those who don't reveal everything by how fast they rush to silence you. Guard your digital trail. In the modern world, manipulation doesn't just happen face to face. It hides in your inbox, your messages, your posts, and your data. Every click, comment, or confession can be weaponized by someone who wants control. That's why guarding your digital trail isn't paranoia. It's self-preservation. Once you share something online, it stops belonging entirely to you. Manipulators know this, and they watch, collect, and wait for moments of vulnerability they can use later. They might twist your words, screenshot private conversations, or use your own posts to guilt or shame you. A casual photo, a rant, or an old message can become ammunition in the wrong hands. Guarding your trail means thinking before you type, setting boundaries before you share, and treating your online presence like your personal fortress. Privacy settings, encrypted chats, and digital minimalism aren't overreactions, they're armor. Psychologically, digital caution strengthens your sense of control. Every time you choose silence over oversharing, you reinforce your independence. You deny manipulators access to the emotional map they crave, the clues about your fears, your routines, your weak points. The truth is, information is power, and in the wrong hands, it becomes manipulation. When you guard your digital trail, you're not hiding. You're protecting your peace. You're deciding what parts of your life deserve to stay sacred, unseen, and untouched by anyone who hasn't earned your trust. In a world that wants your data more than your boundaries, digital discretion is the new defense.